Here is a secret most people never find in their Bible. We often feel too small to change a thing, yet a forgotten female warrior once used such brilliant military strategy that commanders still study her today. But her story is missing from most modern scriptures. Her name is Judith, hidden away in the Apocrypha, and her courage is mind-blowing. Let us look at how this unlikely hero used psychological warfare, calculated seduction, and flawless timing to destroy a massive empire when we felt completely powerless. We will trace her journey from insignificance to her impossible mission, seeing how she turned certain doom into absolute victory. But before we begin, if you are new to our community of seekers, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel. Supporting us helps us keep creating these deeply researched videos to inspire you when things feel too big to handle. Also, let us know where you are watching from and what time it is. We really want to connect with you. Now let us begin. Imagine being a tiny nation in the path of the brutal Assyrian storm. In ancient times, massive empires swallowed up small tribes like us, the way giant waves wash away helpless grains of sand. But no one spread terror like the Assyrians did. From Mesopotamia, they built a war machine designed to crush our souls. Their vast armies marched toward us like an unstoppable swarm of locusts, leaving nothing but dust in their wake. Our struggle is recorded in the Book of Judith, a sacred text blending history with a deeper spiritual message. Written between 150 and 100 BCE, it purposely alters facts to give hope to desperate people who felt entirely powerless against their oppressors. The author weaves different legends together, creating a powerful story designed to ignite faith in our hearts when we are weak, rather than just listing dry historical facts. In this story, King Nebuchadnezzar rules from Nineveh, not Babylon, which is historically impossible. But this tells us that the story is a parable for the helpless. In reality, he destroyed Nineveh, but in our tale, he represents the ultimate terrifying threat to our survival. This sacred text weaves history into a lesson about an impossible rescue when all hope is lost. Here, Nebuchadnezzar has just crushed a rival king near Ecbatana. His easy victory makes him incredibly arrogant, and he turns his eyes toward us. He demands that every province join his brutal campaign. Most of the western lands, including our tiny mountain homes in Judea, refuse to kneel. We were too small to fight, yet we refused to bow down to his tyranny. We refused to submit. We refused to send him soldiers or recognize his power. Our defiance drove the king into a terrible rage. He summoned his commanders, and among them stood Holofernes, his most vicious general, ready to crush our tiny world. Holofernes was a monster of tactical genius and pure cruelty. The king handed him a massive army with a simple, terrifying order: force us into submission or wipe us off the face of the earth. We were to receive absolutely no mercy. He gathered an army that made us feel completely insignificant. The scriptures list 120,000 foot soldiers and 12,000 cavalry. This massive force was designed to show us that resistance was utterly hopeless. They had endless supply lines and heavy siege weapons. It was a giant imperial machine designed to grind us into dust. As the general marched west, town after town crumbled before his path. We watched in terror as the giant drew closer. Some cities surrendered instantly to save themselves. Others fought and were completely destroyed. But Holofernes did not care. He showed no mercy either way. Everyone was slaughtered and everyone was plundered. There was no escape from his wrath. We all learned the terrifying cost of defying the empire. Their army crossed rivers and mountains, shattering generations of peace. Holofernes did not just conquer. He systematically erased our world. He burned our crops, destroyed our temples, and left us with nothing. He cut down our sacred forests, aiming to tear out our very identity and crush our spirits. As refugees flooded into our mountain sanctuaries with stories of horror, the terror arrived long before the army did. We felt completely helpless, listening to their screams. Great cities became ash, and our people were dragged away in chains. Their brutal psychological warfare worked perfectly, paralyzing us with fear before they even drew their swords against our small communities. We faced an impossible situation, trapped directly in the path of this unstoppable monster. Our mountains, which had kept us safe for centuries, now felt like fragile walls that would only delay the inevitable slaughter. Our stone fortresses felt like paper against the storm. The high priest Joachim sent frantic letters from Jerusalem, begging us to defend the narrow mountain passes. He told us to stand firm, but we felt so small. We had to protect Jerusalem at all costs, because if it fell, our entire world would vanish. So with trembling hands and desperate hearts, we prepared for siege. We did not have hope, only the courage of the doomed. We gathered what little food we could, trying to remember ancient stories of God saving our ancestors from Egypt and the Philistines. But in the shadow of this massive army, those old miracles felt distant and fake. They felt like fairy tales from a time when God actually cared. Terror spread through our mountain villages like ice. Mothers looked at their crying children, wondering if they would even survive to see another spring. Our fathers gripped their rusty weapons, knowing they were no match for professional killers. The elders whispered that this was the end of everything. Meanwhile, Holofernes sat in his tent studying maps of our final hiding places. His scouts warned him about our steep mountain cliffs and narrow pathways. But the general just laughed. He had crushed desperate people in the hills before. He knew exactly how to make us break. He knew our faith would crumble once we ran out of water. No mountain fortress can hold out when your throat is burning. So the great imperial war machine crawled closer, eating up the miles between us and destruction. While priests prayed in Jerusalem, we gathered the last scraps of food we had. In the cold mountain passes, our men waited with shaking hands. The storm was here. We knew it would strike. We only wondered if anyone would survive. We were caught in the gears of history. While great empires grew rich and powerful in the flat, fertile valleys of Mesopotamia, our rocky Judean mountains had nothing but strategic value. We were poor, but we stood right in the way of giants. If you held our mountains, you held the keys to Egypt. The Assyrians knew this, and so did we, making our doom inevitable. Holofernes tortured our neighbors to learn where we hid, pinpointing every weak spot in our defense. He saw the one critical bottleneck that could break us. It was our tiny home Bethulia, a mountain fortress guarding the path to Jerusalem. If Bethulia fell, Jerusalem was finished. The general smiled, knowing he had found the throat he wanted to squeeze. This was the beginning of the end, the siege of our home, the chokehold on our people. Bethulia sat like a tiny crown on a ridge. Scholars today debate where we actually stood, wondering if our town was just a symbol of all the small communities fighting to survive. Our name meant the house of God, a sanctuary for the helpless. Only our high mountain walls and the steep, narrow pass below gave us any hope of holding back the tide. We were small, but we had the high ground. My home Bethulia means house of God. It sits high above a narrow, rocky pass. Geography is our only shield, but looking down I feel too small to change our fate. To march through here, a giant army must crush our tiny town, or risk a deadly detour. Our founders chose these rocky cliffs, hoping the natural springs would keep us safe. Our stone walls look so small now. Holofernes arrives with a vast empire of soldiers blocking every exit. Their endless tents spread across the valley, forming a terrifying city of their own. Their campfire smoke chokes us, The endless clashing of weapons and thousands of shouting voices constantly remind us of our helplessness. But their general is patient. He knows how to starve out small towns. We have the height advantage, sure, but we only delay the inevitable. We can rain down arrows and stones, but a frontal attack would eventually crush us, even if it costs them soldiers. Their general wants a bloodless victory. He studies our tiny town from below, sending scouts and questioning locals until he uncovers our fatal flaw. Yes, we have some wells inside our walls, but those wells cannot save us. Our real water comes from springs down the mountain slope, springs that his massive army now controls. I can only watch as he gives the order. Cut off their water. Guard every stream. They execute this order with terrifying precision, sealing off every single spring. We can only look down at the armed patrols blocking our survival. They build forts over our springs, slowly tightening a noose around our lives. Up here, my neighbors try to stay brave. We still have food, some water, and faith that God will save us. Our men watch the walls, while the children play, too young to understand the horror creeping in. We pretend things are normal, but as days pass, our wells dry up. The strict rationing begins. Every family gets a tiny cup of water, just enough to survive, never enough to stop the burning. The terrifying truth settles over us. They will not attack. They are just going to wait. They are letting thirst do their dirty work. The brutal summer heat beats down, and our cisterns run dry. I start to wonder if being slaves is better than watching our children die of thirst. Our leaders try to keep order, dividing the last drops of water and begging us to stay strong. They pray and talk of old miracles to keep hope alive, but we can all see the end. Even our leaders are growing weak. Can faith really sustain our dying bodies? Below us, Holofernes watches with a smug smile. He has conquered us without losing a single soldier. He broke our spirits without a battle. Soon we will beg to surrender and bow before his power. Then Jerusalem lies open. His empire grows, and we are just dust under their boots. But the general does not know his perfect siege has one weak spot. It is not his tactics or his control of our water. It is his belief that helpless people have nowhere left to turn. He counted on our physical weakness, but he forgot what happens when helpless people have nothing left but faith. He never imagined that rescue could come from someone as small as us, that a lone widow praying in her room could undo his entire empire. But that is for later. Right now we are slowly dying up here while he waits below like a patient predator. Day 34 of the siege hits us with pitiless heat. No clouds, no breeze. Our town has become a graveyard, not from the quick mercy of battle, but the agonizing slow death of dehydration. Bodies lie where they fell because we are too weak to bury them. Our tongues swell, our lips bleed, and our eyes sink into our skulls. Even our children cannot cry. Their tiny bodies have no tears left. This silence is worse than the sounds of war. It is the silence of our death. In dark homes, helpless mothers hold babies who no longer move, their blank eyes staring at nothing. We are too dry to cry, even if we had the strength. We just hold our children and wait for the end. Our grandparents go first, their old bodies giving up in the quiet. They slip away in their sleep. We do not even have the energy to mourn. We bury them quickly to save our tiny bit of strength. Our proud young defenders now slump uselessly against the stone walls. Their weapons lie forgotten. Our watchmen do not even look anymore. Why should they? The Assyrians do not need to attack. They just sit comfortably below, knowing we are too weak to fight. Time is fighting their battle for them. Our market square, once so loud and busy, is now filled with desperate crowds. We gather not to trade but to weep, complain, and ask why we must suffer. The air turns toxic. Despair breeds anger, and anger needs a target. A nameless man stands up. His name does not matter because he speaks for all of us at our breaking point. His words hit us hard. Why are we doing this? Why choose death when surrendering could save our kids? Others join in. The voices multiply. A mother screams about her daughter who died last night, her tiny body finally giving up. A father weeps, describing how his son begged for water that does not exist. An old man asks if our leaders are just waiting for us all to die. The anger boils over. We march to the house of Uzziah, our chief magistrate. We flood his street, pounding on his gates and demanding he face us. No more empty talk of faith and rescue. We want answers. We want action. We want relief. Uzziah finally comes out with the other leaders, Shabris and Shemis. They stand before us, an angry, dying crowd that they are supposed to protect but cannot. He raises his hand and we quiet down, though our anger burns in our sunken eyes. Before he can speak, we start shouting, "You led us to destruction. Surrendering is better than this slow death." A mother's voice rises raw and screaming, "Is your pride worth our children's lives?" We all take up the cry. Better to live as slaves down in the dust than to die of thirst up here. Better to bow to their king than watch our babies die in our arms. Better to lose our freedom than lose everything. When you feel this small, survival is all that matters. Slavery is better than extinction. Call Holofernes. Let them in. We will take whatever terms they give us. Slavery is brutal, but at least slaves get water. At least they can keep their children alive. At least they survive. Death is coming for us all. We press closer, our desperation turning into anger. We aren't rebels looking for a fight. We're just ordinary people pushed past our limits, parents watching our kids die, human beings whose bodies are completely giving out. Everything holding us together breaks when we're left starving. Our leader Uzziah sees the danger. He knows if he refuses us now, we might riot. We might tear down his very house. We might just bypass him entirely and open the city gates ourselves. He has to give us something, any shred of hope, or at least a promise that this torment will end. But I can see the crushing weight he carries beyond this moment. He knows our history and how God saved our ancestors at the very last second. But he also knows surrendering to Assyria means more than chains. It means the absolute end of who we are as a people. It means our faith is wiped out and pagan gods win. Our leader faces a choice that feels impossible to me. Deny us and watch the city burn from within, or give in and betray everything we've ever believed. Die for a principle or crawl to survive. Most choose survival because dying people can't afford pride. When Uzziah finally speaks, his voice is raspy from thirst, but he still sounds like a leader. He doesn't shut us down completely, nor does he lie and say help is on the way. Instead, he offers a desperate compromise, a 5-day delay to test God. He looks at us and says he feels our agony. He suffers just like us. His throat is dry, his family is in danger, and he feels this misery. But he begs us for 5 more days, 5 days to see if God will save us. If no rain falls and no help arrives by then, he promises we will surrender. He gives his word right there in public, locking himself into this deal. 5 days, 120 hours. If nothing changes by then, we will open the gates to our enemies. We'll take whatever awful fate comes next just to stay alive. We stand there weighing his words. 5 days feels like an eternity when you're dying of thirst, yet painfully short for a miracle. We are just too weak to fight him. But a deadline gives us something to hold on to, an end to this misery one way or another. Slowly, we drift away. We crawl back to our homes to wait and suffer, wondering if the God of our ancestors will actually remember us. We are about to find out if our faith is real or just empty words. The clock is ticking. But across town, a quiet widow named Judith hears about this deal, and she begins planning something none of us could ever imagine. It's the heavy burden of our leaders now. As we drag ourselves home to endure 5 more days of agony, the streets empty out. Uzziah stands in his doorway, flanked by his council. They just stand there in the silence, completely speechless. They've made a promise that might destroy us all, or maybe they already failed us by waiting. Uzziah steps inside and shuts the door, completely crushed by the weight of it. His decision satisfies no one, especially not himself. 5 days. A random number that somehow felt right, long enough for a miracle, short enough to stop us from rioting. But a terrifying question remains. Did he just test God? Did he put a deadline on mercy? Uzziah isn't young. He's led our town for years, settling disputes and keeping things running. But those were normal problems with human answers. This nightmare is completely out of his hands. This is beyond anything he's ever faced. How do you lead when every path ends in tragedy? How do you choose between starvation and losing your soul? His council members share that horrific burden. They're just 3 ordinary men trying to navigate impossible waters. They have families to protect. They are dying of thirst just like us, but they have to bear the crushing weight of deciding for the rest of us too. We grew up on stories of absolute trust in God. We were told about the great escape from Egypt, the parting of the seas, and mighty walls falling to miracles. We've heard how God always delivers. We know the tales of brave judges and prophets who saved us in dark times. The message was clear: God never abandons us. But those are ancient stories from a completely different world. We know the old stories, but we also know our reality. We know the dry, choking feeling in our throats. We see our children dying. We feel the weakness making every step agonizing. Stories don't cure thirst. Belief won't fill our empty wells. When do we stop waiting for a miracle and actually do something? That's the question haunting our leader now. When does faith turn into a death sentence? When does trust become sheer foolishness? There are no easy answers. As Uzziah sits in the quiet, he has to face his 5-day promise. What can actually happen in 5 days? Will rain pour from a dry sky? Will water burst from these rocks? Will an army suddenly arrive to break this brutal siege? Realistically, there is no hope. The enemy controls everything. No help is coming. 5 days will pass, nothing will change, and more of us will die. Yet I think some small part of Uzziah refuses to accept this. Call it stubbornness or a deep memory of survival. He can't believe our story ends this way, just dying of thirst in a forgotten mountain town while an army waits below. This can't be our end, but what if it is? What if God truly abandoned us? What if faith is just a story we tell ourselves to feel better in a brutal world? It's a terrifying, forbidden thought. But as I look at our leader, I know those same doubts are crushing him right now. He gave God a deadline. The sheer arrogance of it must terrify him now that we've gone and he's alone. Who is he, a tiny man, to tell the creator of the universe when to save us? But what choice did he have? Let us riot and tear the town apart, or just throw open the gates and hand us over to a merciless enemy? To someone feeling this small, every single path looks like complete destruction. Being a leader means choosing between nightmares. In the quiet of his room, the council finally asks the question we are all whispering. What happens in 5 days when nothing changes, when we surrender? What will they do to us? History tells us the enemy has no mercy. They don't just accept defeat, they crush those who resist. They will make an example of us. Our town will be completely stripped. The soldiers will grab anything of value. We don't have much up here in the mountains, but they'll tear our homes apart for whatever scraps they can find. They will drag us off in chains. Some of us will be marched to Nineveh, while others are scattered across the empire, ripped from our families and forced to forget who we are. They'll scatter us, breaking our spirits until our town is completely forgotten. We'll just be nameless subjects of their empire, our home reduced to dust. The Assyrians might leave our walls standing, but they will burn our homes. They will defile our temples, making Bethulia a brutal lesson for anyone daring to resist. That is what happens when you defy an empire. That is the devastating price of standing up. And what happens to Jerusalem if we just let them walk through? The enemy marches on, exposing our entire heartland. Our temple, our heritage, everything we hold sacred lies in ruins. Surrendering Bethulia might save us today, but it condemns everyone else tomorrow. Yet, how can Uzziah ask his starving people to die for strangers who cannot help them? The leader paces his tiny room, dragging his feet. Thirst has drained him, just like the rest of us. He is no untouchable hero. He is just a normal man, trying to find a right path where none exists. A leader who never wanted this war, now crushed by its weight. He feels the same terror, the same doubt, the same fragile hope we all do. Then Shamash offers a spark of light. What if help actually comes? What if we break this siege, or rain finally falls, or God steps in? 5 days might be just enough time for a miracle. Maybe our tiny, desperate minds simply cannot see the bigger picture. Stranger things have happened in our history, impossible rescues from the brink of ruin. Uzziah wants to believe it so badly. But when you feel this helpless faith feels like clutching at smoke, impossible to hold on to. Still, it is all we have. 5 days, 120 hours. Just enough time for a miracle, or just enough time for more innocent people to die before we finally break. The three men bow their heads. They whisper the ancient prayers of their ancestors. They beg God for rescue, admitting they are completely powerless in this moment. They cry out for strength, for wisdom, for any sign that they are not completely alone. The prayers offer a quiet comfort, but no answers come. No voice speaks from above. No angels appear. Just three terrified, ordinary men in a dying town, clinging to hope by their fingernails. They are left wondering if faith is real or just a desperate refusal to face reality. Uzziah sends them home. They need rest, a drop of water, and to face their families. The meeting ends, but the crushing burden remains. 5 days left. The clock is ticking. And somewhere in our dying city, a widow named Judith sits in her room listening. She hears what the leaders promised and begins to see a path they missed. The quiet whisper of a widow. While the powerful agonize over impossible choices and we slowly die of thirst, one home remains strangely quiet amidst the panic. It sits behind the same city walls as the rest of us, but its spirit is entirely different, moving to a calm rhythm while our world falls apart. This is Judith's home. Her story begins with a long-respected family line, the daughter of Merari, descendant of Simeon. This ancient heritage is traced with absolute precision, showing that even the smallest among us can have deep, powerful roots. She is no outsider or stranger to our struggles. Her roots run deep in our history. But she is also a woman of sorrow. Her husband Manasseh passed away 3 years before this terrifying siege ever began. He died during the barley harvest, a sign of his great wealth. He owned vast fields and had many servants. When he left this world, all his riches and status passed to Judith, making her incredibly wealthy in our small town. His death was a reminder of how fragile we are. While overseeing his harvest, the brutal summer sun struck him down. A simple case of heat stroke, a silent killer that takes so many of us. He collapsed in the dirt. They carried him home, but he died in his bed, with Judith by his side. 3 years have passed since that dark day. 3 years of her living in quiet, solitary grief. She managed her estate alone, refusing to remarry. Rich widows always draw attention, and many men tried to win her hand. But she turned them all away, choosing a life of quiet devotion hidden from our noisy world. She retreated to a small upper room far from the busy household below. This tiny chamber became her sanctuary, a place to pray, reflect, and escape the crushing weight of the world. There she practiced a devotion that put the rest of us to shame. She fasted constantly, not just on holidays, but every single day except for the Sabbath and feasts. Such discipline would break an ordinary person. She rarely ate. Her discipline was absolute, her dedication profound. When she did take food, it was nothing but plain fare. No rich delicacies, no servants preparing feasts, despite all her incredible wealth. She lived like someone forever in mourning, as if her grief would never fade. But now she promises rescue before our 5 days expire. Her absolute certainty leaves no room for doubt. Shamus finally finds his voice again. He asks the obvious question: how can we let a helpless woman walk out into danger with a secret plan? What if the enemy captures her? What if they hurt her? The crushing weight of her life rests entirely on us. But Judith lifts that burden. She makes it clear this is her own choice, her own desperate leap. We are not sending her into the fire. We are just stepping aside. And that small difference changes everything. Sometimes leaders must stand back and let the powerless act. But Shamus has another fear. Is she going to sacrifice herself to save our city? Is this a suicide mission to buy us time? The idea of trading her life for ours terrifies us. Yet we are desperate. But Judith tells us her plan isn't that simple. What lies ahead for her is something completely unexpected, something that must remain in the dark. She only asks for our prayers, and that we keep the gates ready for her return. We must trust God to work in ways we are too small to understand. The 3 men look at each other, helpless. We have no other choice. Our own plans end in surrender. Judith offers a tiny spark of hope, however dim. What do we have to lose? If she fails, we are still doomed. If she succeeds, everything changes. The logic is brutal but simple. Uzziah agrees. He will order the guards to let this widow and her servant walk out of the gates. He won't ask questions. He will just pray. The other leaders nod silently. We have just placed our entire survival onto the shoulders of a grieving widow. I don't know whether to feel relief or absolute shame. As Judith prepares to leave, she gives us one final order. She tells our leaders to do their jobs, keep the peace, hold our fragile town together so panic doesn't swallow us whole. She promises she will return, and when she does, everything we thought we knew will change. We will see that God still cares for the weak and forgotten. The leaders leave for their homes, minds spinning with doubt. What can she possibly do? How can one solitary woman change the fate of an empire? Yet we let her go. When you are this desperate, a fool's hope is better than no hope at all. Alone in her room, the grieving widow packs her things. It is time for her to step into the light. After 3 years of wearing nothing but grief, you are finally ready to change. A quiet soul of prayer, preparing to become the last thing anyone expected. This next step of your plan requires more than just faith. It demands meticulous planning, not just courage, but absolute precision. Not mere hope, but bold, decisive steps. And you are ready. The trap is set. A prayer to bless a lie. Night falls over Bethulia, silent except for the faint, desperate cries of the dying. Somewhere close by, A child whimpers. Down the street, a dry, choked cough rattles in a parched throat. Up on the walls, starving guards drag their feet, saving what little strength they have left. Below, the glowing campfires of the enemy circle the mountain. The contrast is brutal. Down there, warmth and plenty. Up here, slow death and starvation. In your high chamber, you drop to your knees, feeling so incredibly small. You have sent your maid away for now. What comes next must be done alone. You have to speak words no other soul can hear yet. You must lay your dark plan before God, begging for grace to do things that shatter every moral rule. Your room is completely bare, despite your great wealth. No fine furniture, no decorations, just a quiet corner to pray. You have spent countless hours here over the last 3 years. This small room has held all your grief, your tears, and your worship. But tonight, it is about to witness something entirely different. Tonight, you will pray for a lie to succeed. You press your face to the cold floor, arms spread wide, surrendering entirely. You do not start by asking for favors. You begin by remembering. You whisper the stories of your ancestors. You recall the times God used the weakest, most broken souls to shatter empires. You think of how the powerless somehow brought down the mighty. You speak the name of your ancient forefather Simeon. You remember Dinah and the blood spilled at Shechem, the assault, the fierce vengeance, and the deadly trickery that followed. You do not flinch from the raw horror of that ancient tale. You look it right in the eye, accepting its brutal truth. You pray that what happened then will happen again tonight. A conqueror who expects to master a woman undone by his own lust. It is a heavy, dangerous prayer. You are not asking for angels or heavenly armies. You do not ask for miracles or water from dry stone. You ask God to bless a plan built on lies and seduction, using your own body as a weapon of rescue. The moral weight is crushing, and you feel it completely. You speak it aloud. You will walk straight into an enemy camp of thousands of soldiers, with only your maid at your side. No armor, no shield, just your wits and God's grace. So many things could go horribly wrong. A rogue soldier, a guard who sees through your act, a single moment when the general's lust turns to deadly rage. You know the risks. You are not praying to escape danger, but to survive inside it. Your prayer shows you know how God works. You do not expect a miracle to bypass you. You ask Him to work through you. God is not going to strike Holofernes down with lightning. He will steady your own hand to take his life. God will not defeat this army with magic. He will use the raw panic that grips them when they find their general dead. Deliverance requires you to act. You pray for the exact things you need. That the enemy believes your lies. That Holofernes is blinded by your beauty. That you get him alone, and that the moment comes when his guard is down. And that you will have the courage to strike when the time comes. Everything depends on perfect timing. Every single step must go right. You pray for hours, pleading for that alignment, refusing to rush. You do not just whisper a quick request and leave. You empty your soul. You wrestle with the morality of what you are about to do, making sure this is not pride. You surrender yourself as a weapon. You pray that God will guide you to the right target at the perfect moment. As you pray, a shift happens inside you. The terror does not vanish, but it steps back. The doubt quietens down, replaced by a sudden, sharp clarity. You know this is the only way. This design is not just yours. You were born for this. All those years of quiet devotion and discipline were leading to this exact second. Your grief was not a waste, it was training. You think of your late husband, Manasseh. Your departed husband never could have guessed you would become this. He married a quiet woman from a good family. He got a gentle companion and a peaceful, wealthy life. He never could have imagined that 3 years after his passing, you would be kneeling here begging for the power to slaughter an enemy general. Life takes wild, unexpected turns. We become whatever survival demands. You stand up. The choice is made. Your resolve is absolute. You leave the outcome to God, but you have offered your own hands to do the work. The deal is sealed. Tomorrow, the grieving widow becomes a lethal weapon. Tonight, you try to rest, despite the hunger and terror. Your final night as a simple, faithful widow. Your last night before you become a savior. The final moments of your old life before the new one tears it away. You lie down in the dark. Sleep is slow to come, your mind racing through the details. The lies you will tell, the clothes you will wear, the way you must act. Everything must be flawless. One slip-up means your death and the slaughter of your entire city. The weight is massive, but you are used to carrying heavy things. Grief is heavy. Loss is heavy. 3 years of silence is heavy. This is just a different kind of pain, and you are strong enough to carry it. Outside, the enemy campfires burn bright where thousands of soldiers sleep soundly. They dream of victory and plunder waiting for your city to break. They have no idea that their doom is being plotted in a widow's small bedroom. They cannot imagine their mighty commander falling to a woman's beauty and a blade. They sleep safe in their arrogance. That pride is their blind spot, and you are going to exploit it. You must transform from a grieving widow into a breathtaking temptation. The woman who walks through those city gates tomorrow must not look like the person they know. The grieving widow must vanish, replaced by a woman of breathtaking grace and beauty. The lie must be perfect, undeniable. You call your servant the faithful woman who has stood by you through all these years of loneliness. She never questioned your harsh life, your fasting, or your prayers, but now she is about to witness the unthinkable, and you are going to ask her to help you do it. You speak to her, keeping the details hidden. You tell her you are both leaving the city tonight, heading straight for the enemy camp to save your people. Her eyes go wide, but she says nothing. Years of shared pain have built absolute trust. If you say it must be done, she believes you. If you say this is God's will, who is she to argue? The change begins with water, precious, rare water that your dying neighbors desperately need. You have kept a small reserve, and now you use it to wash away 3 years of widow's dust. You purify yourself not just for the law, but for the mission. You are preparing your body to be stared at, to be lusted after, to be used as a trap. You take your time. This is no quick splash of water to start the day. This is a complete cleansing. As you step out, your skin is clean for the first time in ages. In a dying city with no water to drink, you have used it for beauty. It feels wrong, but your mission demands it. Then comes the anointing. I have these expensive oils and perfumes tucked away, untouched since my husband Manasseh passed. They were his gifts to me, costly imported scents that wealthy women wear when they want to be noticed. Today, I open jars that have been sealed for years. The rich, heavy scents fill the room. I rub the oil carefully into my skin and my hair, not just dabbling it on, but pouring it over myself like I am preparing for some holy ritual. And in a way I am, because what I am preparing to do is holy in its purpose, even if my methods are terrifying. This perfume will be my armor. It will announce my presence, signal my status, and make them see me as a woman of wealth and refinement. I focus on my hair. For 3 years, I have kept it covered and hidden away in mourning, but now I let it fall. I comb it out gently and style it like a noblewoman, an elaborate look that screams wealth and demands attention. My hair is no longer just hair. It is part of the trap, part of my weapon. And then the dress. This is the hardest part. I open a chest that has sat locked for 3 years. Inside are the beautiful dresses I wore before my husband died. Fine silk and heavy robes, the kind of clothes that tell the world I am someone of status. I haven't looked at these clothes since I packed them away in grief. I pull them out, searching not for the modest options or the plain wraps, but for something that turns heads. I choose a dress that makes me look beautiful, powerful, and utterly desirable. The fabric is soft and expensive, tailored to show off my figure in rich, deep colors. When I slide it on, I barely recognize myself. Next is the jewelry. I still have a vast collection left to me by my late husband: gold, silver, and precious gems. For 3 years, these treasures sat forgotten in dark boxes. Now I pull them out. Bracelets on my wrists, rings on my fingers, necklaces, earrings. I choose every piece to make a statement. Together they tell a lie that I am someone important, someone they must respect. Finally, I clasp on the anklets. They are delicate chains that chime softly whenever I move, drawing eyes down to my feet. Every step I take will make a quiet, seductive music. It is feminine, alluring, and completely intentional. I haven't worn things like this since I was a young bride. As I fasten them, I feel their weight, hear their ring, and know exactly what they say. I slip on my sandals, not my dusty everyday shoes, but elaborate, decorated ones, fit for royalty. Every single detail matters. Every choice builds the disguise I have to wear. When I finally look in the mirror, I gasp. I haven't seen this woman in years. The grieving widow is completely gone. The woman staring back at me is striking, powerful, and commanding. She is the kind of woman who commands a room, the kind a general would want, the kind who can get close to power. My maid just stares at me in pure shock. She has served me for years, knowing only the quiet widow in rough sackcloth who spent her days praying. This change is unbelievable to her. It reveals a strength she never knew I had, a dangerous side of me that I kept hidden deep down. I tell her to pack our bags. We need food for the journey and for our time inside the enemy camp. But I am very strict about one thing. We will only eat clean, kosher food prepared exactly according to our sacred law. I won't compromise on my faith, even if I have to lie and manipulate to save my people. Into the bag goes our wine-roasted grain, dried fruit, figs, and clean cheese, enough to keep us alive for days. It is a strange tightrope. I dress like a temptress, yet guard my diet like a priest. I will use my beauty as a weapon, but I refuse to betray my God. This line in the sand is where I keep my soul intact. Some things are just tools to be used. Others are who I am, at my core, things I can never throw away. I will bend, but I won't break. As the sun sets and the hour of our departure nears, I gather what little courage I have left. The disguise is set, the food is packed, the plan is in place. Now comes the terrifying part, stepping out of safety into the jaws of death, leaving everything I know and trusting God to protect me while I play this deadly game. My maid looks at me with a mix of awe and terror. She agreed to come with me to carry our food and to stand by whatever crazy plan I have made. She is loyal to me, even if she doesn't understand what we are doing. She is the kind of friend who makes impossible plans work, willing to trust, to take risks, and to follow me into the dark. I take one last look at my rooftop room, my sanctuary, where I spent hours crying and praying, the only place that knows my true grief. I don't know if I will ever see this room again. If my plan fails, I will die in the enemy camp. This might be my last moment here. The realization brings a wave of grief, but I force myself to push it down. No room for tears now, only action. I walk down the stairs. The broken widow who climbed up here 3 years ago is not the woman leaving today. Everything has shifted. The woman of sorrow has put on royal robes. The grieving wife has become a seductress. The praying woman is now a soldier, and our town's only hope walks in sandals that chime with every step. We head out into the dark. Night has fallen over Bethulia. It is time. My maid and I slip through the quiet streets. Almost no one is out. Most are hiding indoors, saving their breath, starving, waiting for the end. The few who see me pass are too weak or shocked to even speak. Who is this stunning woman walking through their dying city, they must wonder. Where is she going dressed like royalty? Word has reached the guards that I am coming. The governor kept his promise and told them to let me pass without questioning me. Still, when I reach the gates, the guards just stare. They only know me by my reputation. Some have seen me in my mourning clothes, but never like this. The shock strikes them mute. I speak to them formally, telling them my name, even though they know exactly who I am, and ask them to open the gates. I tell them I am heading down into the valley. I offer no explanation, and they do not ask for one. The governor's orders were clear: let me go. But they still hesitate. Opening the gates at night is dangerous. The enemy is out there. What if they attack? What if the enemy rushes the opening? But my calm face steadies them. If I, a helpless widow, am not afraid, why should they be? They turn the gears. The heavy wooden gate swings open, groaning on its hinges. Outside is nothing but pitch black, dotted with enemy campfires. The valley floor lies half a mile below us, down steep, rocky cliffs. Walking down in the dark is incredibly dangerous, but waiting for sunrise ruins everything. I need the cover of the night to slip away unseen. If my people saw me, they might try to stop me. If they knew what I was about to do, they would hold me back. I take a deep breath and step through the gate. My maid follows, clutching our bag of food. The guards watch us walk away, 2 defenseless women marching into an enemy camp of thousands, marching straight into a trap that can only end in death or worse. The guards cannot understand my plan. They can only watch, wonder, and pray. The heavy gate slams shut behind us with a loud final thud. There is no going back now. We are outside the walls now, stripped of all protection, cut off from our people. We are suspended between 2 worlds, no longer safe at home, not yet captured by the enemy. Just 2 tiny shadows creeping down a steep, rocky mountain path. In the light, this path is hard. In the dark, it is a death trap. I move with agonizing care. These fancy sandals were not made for rocks. My jewelry clinks loudly with every step, and the perfume that smelled so perfect in my room now feels suffocating out here. Nothing about what I am doing makes sense on paper, but it is the only way to reach my goal. My servant clings to my side, carrying our heavy bag down this treacherous cliffside. She does not complain or question, she just follows. I am so grateful for her loyalty. What I am trying to do would be impossible alone. I need a witness, a helper, someone to carry the weight when the time comes. We crawl down slowly as my home Bethulia vanishes into the dark above. The only world I have ever known fades away. Below us, the enemy fires burn bright. A massive army of soldiers and siege weapons fills the valley. Somewhere in that sea of tents sits Holofernes, the general I have to find. He is my target, the one man whose death could scatter this entire invasion. Honestly, the contrast is laughable. What can 2 powerless women do against thousands of soldiers? What difference can one widow make against an empire? Logic says absolutely nothing. Any sane person would turn back. But my mind does not work that way. I believe in a God who uses the weak to humble the strong, choosing the most insignificant tools to do the impossible. As we finally reach the valley, the sounds of the camp drift up to us. Laughter, soldiers talking, horses shifting, a faint song, and the clinking of armor. They are not on guard. They are completely relaxed, confident of victory, just waiting for my starving people up there to finally surrender. They do not expect danger, especially not two women walking right out of the dark. I pause before the final step. This is my point of no return. Once we touch the valley floor, there is absolutely no going back. This plan will either save us or destroy us. There is no middle ground, no safe escape. I take a deep breath, whisper a prayer, smooth my dress, and step down onto the flat valley floor, leaving the safety of the rocks behind. We stand in the shadows for a brief moment, caught between two worlds. Behind us, my people are slowly dying. Ahead of us, our enemies feast in comfort. And here we are, two solitary women about to try the impossible. I quickly adjust my robes, making sure I still look flawless despite the rough climb. My jewelry must catch the firelight, my clothes arranged perfectly. First impressions are everything. I have to look like a wealthy noble fleeing for her life, not like an assassin coming to kill their commander. The act begins now. I take my servant's hand and we march toward the nearest campfire. We do not hide or sneak around. We walk openly, as if we belong here. Spies do not walk like this, and neither do soldiers. Only people of high status move with this kind of unbothered confidence. The massive camp spreads out before us, endless and powerful. Somewhere in that maze of tents and men, Holofernes is resting, plotting, or celebrating his victory. Somewhere in that crowd is the one man whose death changes history. I walk toward him, toward my destiny, and the moment I have braced for. Behind me, the gates of my city are locked. There is only forward, straight into the enemy lines, toward a meeting that will decide if my people live or die. Then comes the first test. An Assyrian patrol spots us immediately. Two women, walking right out of the dark, walking openly without trying to hide. The guards jump to attention. This makes no sense to them. Usually starving refugees try to slip by in the shadows, but we are walking right up to them like we are expected. They move to block our path. 4 soldiers with spears and swords surround us instantly. Their weapons are up, but they do not strike. They are more confused than threatened. Why would 2 women, one dressed like a queen, just stroll into an active military base? They want answers. The leader steps forward, a scarred veteran who has seen it all, though probably never this. He barks a question at me in Aramaic, the local tongue, demanding to know who I am, where I came from, and what I want. I cannot show fear. Fear makes you a victim. Instead, I force myself to project calm control. Speaking their language fluently, I tell them clearly that I am a Hebrew woman from the city above and that I have fled the siege to save myself. I add that I have vital secrets for General Holofernes' intelligence that will let him conquer our land without losing a single soldier. The guards look at each other skeptical. They have heard plenty of wild stories from captives before. Most claims are lies, but they can tell I am different. I am not begging. I am not crying for my life. I am offering them something priceless, something their boss needs to hear. The commander stares at me, trying to read my face. He takes in my expensive dress, my jewelry, my poise. I do not look like a desperate peasant. I look like nobility. That makes my story believable. Someone of my status would actually know high-level secrets, giving them a reason to take me seriously. He also notices how I look in the firelight. Even after climbing down a mountain, my appearance is striking. The soldiers stare. These men have been at war for months, starved of beauty. It is a powerful weapon in my hands. My looks work to my advantage. It is not fair, And it is certainly not right, but it is the hand I have been dealt, and I will play it. The leader decides to bring us straight to his commanding officer. He wants someone else to make the call. If I actually have the secrets I claim to have and he turns me away, his life is forfeit. It is much safer for a low-ranking soldier to pass the responsibility up the chain of command. He tells me we are coming with them. His voice is firm, but not harsh. We are being escorted, not dragged away as prisoners. It is a subtle difference, but it means everything. I nod calmly. This is exactly what I wanted, to be taken deeper into their camp. They are doing my work for me. They surround us, two in front, two behind, and guide us through endless rows of tents. Other soldiers start to notice us. In a war camp, news travels like wildfire. 2 women from the enemy city walking right toward headquarters. Men step out of their tents to gawk, whisper, and point. I keep my head high, walking through this sea of enemies, as if I belong here, as if this is entirely normal. I ignore the hundreds of eyes staring at me. My servant stays tight at my side, clutching our bag. She shows no fear, taking her cue directly from me. If I can stay strong, she will too. We pass their cooking fires. The smell of roasting meat and baking bread is overwhelming. These soldiers have everything they need. It makes my heart ache for my starving city up on the mountain. War is cruel. The powerful feast while the helpless suffer in silence. We are led deeper toward the officers' tents at the heart of the camp. As we walk, I study everything of layout: the guards, the supply tents. Even as a captive, I am gathering the exact details we will need later. Every tiny detail matters. We stop in front of a massive decorated tent that obviously belongs to a high-ranking officer. The guard leader calls out, announcing they have captured 2 women from Bethulia who claim to have secrets for the general. An officer steps out, clean, well-dressed, and radiating authority. He looks at me, his annoyed scowl instantly melting into curiosity as he takes me in. He is just another man whose reactions I can predict and use. He listens as the guard explains where we were found and what I promised. Stepping closer, the officer looks me dead in the eye and demands I repeat my claim. I do, matching his gaze with absolute confidence. I am just a Hebrew widow from Bethulia, fleeing because my home is doomed. Yet I carry a secret information General Holofernes needs to conquer Judea without risking a single soldier. Despite himself, this powerful officer is completely intrigued. He demands to know why I would betray my own flesh and blood, but I have my lie ready. I tell him my people have sinned, broken our sacred laws, and that God has abandoned us. I claim I just want to survive. I tell them I want to live, not die with the losers. It is a story these massive conquerors easily swallow. They know we claim divine protection, that we believe God fights for us. So hearing a helpless woman say, "We lost that favor," makes perfect sense. It explains why someone as small as me would run and offer help. Betraying my God makes sense to them. The officer hesitates. He could turn me away, but what if this fragile widow actually holds the key to his victory? What if my secrets could save his commander precious time and lives? Passing this up could ruin his career. It is safer to let his superiors deal with me. He tells me he will take me straight to General Holofernes, who will decide if my words have value. He warns me to speak carefully because the general does not tolerate fools. I assure him I am ready. A tiny woman like me did not travel all this way to waste time. I am here to serve their great leader and secure his victory, to ensure Assyria gets the glory it deserves. The officer joins the escort, guiding us deeper into the sprawling camp, toward the very heart of their overwhelming power. My chest tightens, my heart pounding wildly against my ribs, though I dare not let it show. This is actually happening. My desperate gamble is working. I am going exactly where I need to be. I passed the first test, but the next will be brutal. For now I have done the impossible. I am inside. They believe me. And I am about to face the monster whose life I have come to end. His massive tent rises before me like a monument to crushing power. Silk gold tables heavy with food, the air is thick with wealth, making me feel smaller than ever. This is the roaring engine of the Assyrian army, and I am walking right into it alone. Holofernes sits in the center of it all. His shadow fills the room like a dark storm. His hands have crushed entire nations. His voice has sent thousands to their graves. Now those terrifying eyes turn directly on me, a lone woman standing at his gate. His battle-hardened officers line the walls, watching me with cold, suspicious eyes, waiting for me to slip up. Their heavy silence pressed down on me. They would weigh my every word against their own hard years. I did not shake. I lowered myself with quiet grace by my own choice, not out of fear. When I stood, my voice rang clear across the tent. "May my lord live forever," I began, using the polished court language they expect. Holofernes leans forward, studying my face. Something about how I stand here completely composed, rather than trembling like a helpless captive, has captured his attention. I do not look like a starving refugee from a doomed town. I look like nobility. "Speak," he commands. I do not rush. I let the silence hang, knowing that a tiny woman's power lies in the quiet spaces between her words. My servant stands behind me like a shadow. At her side is the bag of pure kosher food I brought from home to keep my devotion alive even here. It is a tiny detail, but in this massive camp, every small detail counts. Everything about me must be calculated. I begin to weave my lie, telling them the God of heaven has turned his face from my people because our sins have piled too high and we broke sacred laws. I tell them that in our hunger my people plan to eat the temple's forbidden foods and drink the sacred oil. I speak with the absolute certainty of a prophet describing God's coming wrath as if it were already written in stone. I pretend I am only here to save my own skin, but I am offering Holofernes a prize no ordinary spy could deliver the exact moment his enemies will fall. When they commit this ultimate sin, I whisper, my voice dropping to a low, intimate whisper, God will deliver them directly to you. You will march completely unopposed. The officers stir. They are used to desperate captives begging for their lives, but I am not begging. I offer my secrets like a confident merchant selling rare goods. Holofernes studies me. He has interrogated countless prisoners and knows when someone is lying to save their skin, yet my gaze remains entirely steady. My hands do not shake. I stand before the most terrifying man alive as if I belong here. How will you know when they sin? He tests me, searching for a crack. I answer instantly, God will reveal it to me through prayer. Every night I must go to the valley to pray. He will tell me when they fail. Then you will march and not a single dog will bark. It is a perfect deception. I have just won my freedom to leave their camp. Every night I can keep my customs, eat my pure food, and pray while they wave me through, believing I am their personal oracle. The general smiles. It is a cruel, satisfied look. He sees a clever woman offering him everything. I am offering him an easy, rapid victory instead of a long, grueling siege. His king wants results, and I am handing him speed and certainty. Your God did well to send you, Holofernes says, his voice warming with approval. If you deliver this, your God will be my God. You will live in the palace, famous worldwide. His officers nod. They see a small, clever woman simply choosing survival and luxury over dying with her doomed people. It makes total sense to them. Why perish when I can walk free? To them it is a simple, logical trade. But they cannot feel the fire burning inside my soul, or hear the desperate prayers I whispered in my dark chamber, begging for the strength to do what I must. They see a traitor. I know I am a weapon. Holofernes calls out, "Set up a tent for her, feed her from my table, and give her my wine." I bow my head, acting like a meek, grateful servant. "I cannot eat your food, my lord, or I will offend my God. My own supplies will do." The general waves his hand dismissively. "As you wish. But what will you do when your food runs out?" I look up at him, a dangerous knowing flashing in my eyes. Before my food runs out, the Lord will use my hands to accomplish His will. The words settle in the tent. Much later, they will finally understand what I actually meant. But right now, drunk on arrogance, they only hear what they want. They think a weak woman is helping them conquer. They have no idea I am promising their destruction. Holofernes proudly dismisses me. Guards lead me to a tent near the edge, placed among his trusted advisors, not the common soldiers. Yes, they are watching me, but they are also protecting me. I made myself valuable. They gave me status, and status means freedom. As I walk to my new quarters, soldiers stop and stare. Word is already spreading about the beautiful Hebrew traitor who will deliver their victory. They stare at my fine clothes and steady gaze, completely fooled. To them, I am proof that my people are weak. Once inside my tent, I finally let out a deep breath. I walked directly into the lion's mouth and survived. But this is just the beginning. Now the agonizing wait starts. Now came the terrifying game of building trust, waiting for the moment it became his fatal weakness. My maid set down our food bag and looked at me. No words passed between us. We both understood. I felt so small in this place of death, knowing we would either carry death out with us or never leave here alive. Outside, this massive Assyrian war machine settled into its evening routine. Fires lit, guards rotating, commanders planning our destruction. And there I was, a lone widow in a tiny tent at the absolute edge of it all, beginning my quiet vigil. Just a fragile web of words against an empire. Dawn broke to the roar of waking armies' horns, signaling the watch. Thousands of men preparing for another day of siege. My home was still trapped, but I could feel a tiny shift starting, right here in the heart of their camp. Rumors about me were already spreading. Everyone had an opinion on the Hebrew widow. I rose before dawn, exhausted, but hiding it completely. My maid dressed me, not in last night's striking silks, but in clothes that were simple yet elegant. Every detail had to be perfectly balanced. Too much jewelry and I looked fake. Too little and I lost the noble status protecting me from these soldiers. I walked down to the ravine under their heavy gazes. They watched where I went, listening to my quiet prayers, seeing only a pious woman kneeling by the water. They saw a harmless, devout widow. They never saw the steel hidden beneath my prayers. They couldn't fathom that my faith was exactly what made a powerless woman like me so dangerous. When I returned, the great General Holofernes summoned me. He wanted my prophecies, my secrets, any weakness he could use against my people. I went to him willingly, sitting where he pointed, drinking only water. I started molding his mind, feeding him exactly what to believe. I told him, my people are only protected as long as they don't sin against God. My voice sounded steady, backed by a lifetime of scripture. Every single word was technically true, because the best lies are made of honest facts wrapped in false promises. I detailed our laws and sacred rituals to this giant of a man, our festivals and holy duties. He listened like a wolf mapping out a lamb's defenses. His officers took notes, pressing me for details. How many men us? What food is left? How long before thirst breaks them? I answered everything. I painted a picture of our dry wells, our strictly rationed water, the sheer panic in the streets, and how our faith was shattering. It was all true, confirming what his scouts already knew, which made my lies sound like absolute gospel. They've set a limit, I whispered, dropping my voice. 5 days. If God doesn't save them by then, they surrender. This deadline was real, but I omitted my anger at our leaders for giving up so easily. I hid my own secret prayers for strength. I just fed him selected crumbs of truth arranged to trap him. And the general smiled. 5 days. He could wait 5 days. To a conqueror, that was nothing. And here I was, a tiny woman, promising him he wouldn't even have to fight. I told him my prayers would reveal the exact moment God abandoned us, and I would tell him when to strike. His ego filled the entire tent. He bragged of his bloody campaigns, crushed cities and kingdoms forced to bow. He painted a picture of an empire that could never be stopped. I sat there, looking completely fascinated, playing the part of a fragile woman, awed by his terrifying power. My questions fed his monstrous vanity. I fed his pride, praising his brilliant mind, transforming myself into the perfect audience for a man who loved nothing more than his own voice. Between these sessions, I retreated to my quiet, carefully planned routine. 3 times a day I walked down to the ravine. I prayed toward Jerusalem, washed in the cold spring, and ate only the clean food my maid prepared. Slowly the guards grew used to my face and my quiet, predictable movements. By day 3, my strange habits became completely boring to them. This was my goal. I needed this massive army to stop seeing me. I had to blend into the background, because guards only stay alert when something feels out of place. They watch for threats and escapes, but daily routine makes a person completely invisible. It gave me a quiet pass to explore, mapping out their entire camp in my head, focusing on his quarters. I timed their guard shifts and memorized the officers' idle chatter. I learned who held the real power and who was just wearing a fancy uniform. Every tiny detail I gathered felt like a secret weapon hidden up my sleeve. Meanwhile, Holofernes gloated to his generals about his new prize. "Have you seen the Hebrew woman? Brilliant, beautiful. Her people are fools for letting her go." His men agreed. They had all watched me walking like a ghost through their massive camp. A few spoke to me. I was polite to everyone, but I saved my real intense attention only for Holofernes. I knew how the hearts of powerful men work, how holding back only makes them hunger for you more. By being kind to his men but distant to him, I made myself a prize he desperately wanted to conquer. On the 3rd day, I baited the hook with a lie about our temple oil. "Once they drink what is holy," I told him, "their doom is sealed. God will tell me in my prayers tonight, and tomorrow you will ride to an easy victory." The general leaned back, eyes eager. "How much longer?" I looked at him. "Very soon. My food is almost gone. Before my basket is empty, this will all be over." I spoke the absolute truth, but he heard a promise of his triumph while I meant a promise of his death. Same words, 2 completely opposite worlds. The trap was set. Walking back from my prayers that night, I passed soldiers throwing dice. Their voices dropped as I walked by, followed by a crude comment and a low laugh. To them, I was just a defenseless piece of property, a harmless joke. I was no threat to them, just a harmless, lost woman. Perfect. Back in my tent, my maid brushed my hair. For a brief second, the familiar strokes made me feel safe, like I was home in Bethulia again, living my quiet, grieving life. Then the cold reality hit me. I am in the mouth of the beast. "Tomorrow," I whispered to her, He will invite me to feast. Her hands froze for a second, then went back to brushing. She knew exactly what that meant. No more hiding. No more waiting. After all this planning, praying, and lying, the jaws of the trap were about to snap shut. I closed my eyes, my mind racing back to my starving home. I saw my neighbors dying of thirst. The 5 days were down to 2. I heard the children crying for water, saw the old men collapsing, and my friends weeping over empty jars. I thought of my late husband, Manasseh, gone these 3 years. Would he even recognize me now? Or would he see a monster of lies and dark intent? I had no answers. I couldn't afford them. I had to become whatever it took to save my people. There was no room left for my own soul. I had begged God to use me as a weapon. A sword doesn't ask questions, it just cuts. Outside, the massive army slept. Guard posts changing officers, retiring to their warm beds, entirely unaware of the storm coming. Holofernes sat drinking his wine, dreaming of victory, and me completely blind to his own fast-approaching death. He had no idea his executioner was waiting just a few tenths away. I opened my eyes. Tomorrow. Everything depends on tomorrow. I've spun the web thread by agonizing thread and placed myself right at the center. Now I wait for the beast to step in. I knelt for one last prayer. I didn't ask for safety. I just begged for a steady hand. I needed the strength to do what must be done without hesitation or pity. As the stars wheeled in the deep night, I prepared for battle inside an enemy tent. I am a mere widow here, a fragile guest in this massive stronghold. My days fell into a rhythm. Thousands of enemy soldiers woke up around me, a terrifying force. I always rose earlier than they did, dressing with careful precision to protect my disguise. Then, while the dew still clung to the grass, I walked down to the ravine. The guards stopped challenging me. They nodded, some even smiled. I became part of their scenery, as ordinary as their supply wagons. This routine gave me exactly what I needed, freedom of movement. To them, my predictable habits made me harmless. At the ravine, I washed my hands and feet in the icy pure water. Turning toward Jerusalem, my lips whispered ancient psalms of desperation. Anyone watching saw only a devout widow. They couldn't feel the cold steel hardening inside my soul or my heart beating like a warrior's beneath my prayers. I walked back to my tent as the sun rose, where my maid had laid out a simple meal of bread and fruit. Humble, clean food. I ate slowly, appearing completely devoted. This was no performance. I truly loved our laws, even if they served as my shield. But I knew exactly how these customs helped my mission. By mid-morning, Holofernes would send for me. He wanted answers, my perspective, or just a sharp conversation to test his own wits against mine. I was a tiny player playing a dangerous game with a giant. I never made him wait, but I didn't rush either. Moving through his camp, I quietly memorized everything: where the guards were weak, which officers drank too much, and how they secured their weapons. Every detail I gathered felt like water filling a vessel. Inside his tent, I played my part, answering questions about my people, praising his strategic genius, and laughing at his jokes. I made myself essential without seeming to try. Soon he was showing me his war maps, boasting about his plans. Once my tiny home fell, his army would sweep south, crushing Jerusalem and the coast. He talked about conquering all the way to Egypt as if it were just weather, inevitable and simple. I listened with wide, innocent eyes, asking small questions that let him feel clever. I would ask, "How will you secure the mountain passes or support such a massive army?" Every question fed his ego, and every answer showed me exactly how his mind worked. Sometimes other officers joined us, curious but deeply suspicious of this Hebrew widow in their midst. I didn't try too hard to win them over. That would look fake, and I was already playing a game. So I just remained myself, devout, calm, and seemingly supportive of their victory. Slowly, their suspicion melted. I never changed my story, and I never slipped up. My prayers were public, my devotion absolute. I looked exactly like what I claimed to be, a desperate woman fleeing a doomed city to save herself. In the quiet, boiling afternoons, I would retreat to my tent, but sleep never came. I prayed, planned, and endlessly rehearsed what I had to do, every single step, every look, every breath, every word, every possible mistake. My maid sat nearby, quietly working. We barely spoke, but our silence was a deep bond. She has served me for years and knows my heart, my fears, and my faith. She chose to walk into this trap with me, knowing we both might die. You cannot command that kind of loyalty. At evening, I went back to the ravine to pray while the guards watched my descent. They saw me kneel by the water looking at the darkening sky and thought it was just holy devotion. They didn't realize I was mapping my escape. Every trip taught me the terrain, the guard posts, and the distance to safety. On my way back, I often passed soldiers gathered around their warm fires. They would yell out, "Greetings, Lady Judith. Has your God spoken yet?" I would simply smile and say, "Soon, very soon." They laughed and went back to their dice games. To them, I was just a harmless, exotic distraction from the boredom of war. I wanted them to feel safe. If they didn't fear me, they wouldn't watch me when the moment came. Men never expect danger from a woman, especially a devout one who prays all day and keeps her strict laws. Their blind assumptions were my sharpest weapon. Back in my tent, eating my dwindling food, I knew time was running out. I had planned this carefully. My supplies lasted just long enough to make me a familiar face, but not long enough for him to get bored. On the second night, his servant brought the invitation, a private dinner with the general, just the two of us and a few servants. I bowed slightly, forcing a smile, and told him I would be honored to attend. As the servant left and the tent flap fell shut, I looked at my maid. We both knew. The long wait, the careful acting, it was all over. The trap was set, and now came the most terrifying part, a true test of my fading nerve. That night, I prayed until my knees throbbed against the hard floor. I poured my soul out to the God of my ancestors. I begged for strength, for clarity, and for my hands to remain steady. I didn't ask to be saved. I gave up on safety the moment I left my home. Outside, the massive camp fell silent. Campfires died. Guards swapped shifts with quiet murmurs. This colossal engine of war finally went to sleep. And right in the middle of it, a helpless widow prepared to commit an act of brutal violence. It wasn't just the act, but what it meant. I was going to take a life. Not in self-defense, but cold and planned. The weight of it crushed my soul. Was this justice, or was I just a murderer? I had no real answers. I only knew my people were going to die, and that Holofernes would slaughter everyone if my home fell. Sometimes salvation requires a terrible price. So I begged God to forgive the lies, the violence, and the blood. The dawn came way too fast. I got up and dressed with extreme care. This was my final performance. I had to be flawless, not just beautiful, but completely hypnotic. I had to be irresistible, making him believe that tonight I would finally be his. We arranged my jewelry, applied sweet perfume, and brushed my hair until it caught the lamplight like dark water. I stared into the polished bronze mirror and barely recognized myself. The grieving widow from Bethulia was gone, replaced by a trap designed to mesmerize a cocky general. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. This was just a mask. Underneath, I was focused, praying, and deadly. The day stretched on forever. When you feel too small to change anything, the hours drag, and keeping composure is a silent war against paralyzing fear. She walked to the ravine one last time to pray, returning with a face of absolute calm. A storm raged inside her, but she showed only peace. We all know how it feels to hide our terror. When evening fell, a servant announced the general was waiting. Judith stood up her maid, grabbing their bag of simple provisions. My bag held a simple cloth and an empty space, a silent preparation for the heavy burden I hoped to carry back. I walked through the massive enemy camp toward Holofernes' tent. The sun was setting, lamps flickered to life. Soldiers watched my every step, shouting out their praises. I forced a smile and kept walking, trying to keep my racing heart steady. I had buried my terror in desperate prayer. At the entrance to the general's towering tent, guards pulled back the heavy fabric. Golden light and loud music spilled out, alongside the rich smell of roasted meat. I took one last breath of cool night air. Then I stepped into the very trap I had built. This mighty hunter was walking straight into my snare, completely blind to the fact that I had become his predator. It all started with that fatal invitation. The messenger had arrived earlier that afternoon. He wore the general's personal crest, meaning this was a command, not a polite invitation. I met him at the entrance of my small tent. My maid stood behind me, silent and watching. The messenger announced, "The General Holofernes requests the honor of your presence at a private banquet tonight." His words were formal, but his eyes held a cruel, knowing look. Everyone in this massive camp knew what a private dinner really meant. It was never about the food. I lowered my eyes, acting small and modest. "Tell my lord I am deeply honored by his invitation. I will come gladly." The messenger bowed and left. The moment he was out of sight, I turned to my maid. Our eyes locked. We did not need to speak to know that this was the exact moment we had been waiting for. This was why we were here. This was our only chance. My maid immediately began preparing. She fetched water for me to wash. She laid out my finest dress, the one we had carefully hidden in this dirt camp. Then she packed our food bag with extreme care, making sure every item was in its place. She packed bread, cheese, and our own wine, leaving that crucial empty space, a space that had to be filled if our desperate plan worked. I washed myself with trembling care. I had prayed at the ravine that morning, but now I had to prepare my fragile mind for what lay ahead. Every splash of water was a silent prayer. Every breath was a plea for strength to a God who felt very far away. Once I was dry and wrapped in linen, my maid brought out the clothes. A soft cloud-like tunic and a deep blue robe stitched with silver. She added a jewelry, shining earrings, bracelets that chimed with every movement, and a heavy pendant at my throat. These pieces belonged to my late husband's family, representing a life of wealth. My maid styled my hair completely, hiding the quiet, simple look of my widowhood. She styled it like I was attending a grand festival. She touched sweet myrrh oil to my temples and perfume to my wrists. When it was finished, I stared into our small bronze mirror. The grieving widow was gone. In her place stood a beautiful weapon, dressed to lure a giant. I stared at my own eyes in the glass. I had made myself into a sharp, glittering tool crafted for a single, terrible act. "Are you afraid?" my maid whispered. My chest tightened. The fear was heavy, but it was not the kind that freezes you. It was the kind of terror that sharpens your focus and burns away everything except survival. "I am terrified," I admitted softly. "But my fear and my purpose will walk hand in hand." My maid nodded, her own eyes filled with the exact same quiet resolve. We had thrown ourselves on the mercy of God, desperate enough to believe that a single powerless woman could do what a whole army failed to achieve. As the sun slipped away, I rehearsed every line, every step, every look. Every tiny movement had to seem completely natural while hiding a deadly goal. I had to play the submissive victim while holding all the power. I had to feed his lust without letting it crush me. Above all, I had to get him drunk, not just happy, but entirely helplessly drunk. Only then would his guard finally drop. He had to be so incapacitated that his body would fail. So drunk that when I reached for his heavy sword, he couldn't stop me. A horn sounded. The messenger was back. I pulled a fine wool shawl over my shoulders. My maid picked up our food bag, adjusting its weight. Together we walked out into the massive, sprawling camp as the shadows stretched long. Armies of men stopped to watch us. Some whistled quietly, others muttered words of praise. Whispers raced through the tents. A helpless Hebrew woman was going to the general dressed like a bride. Everyone assumed they knew how this night would end. Let them think that, I thought. Let them believe they know my fate. The general's massive tent sat at the very center of the camp. It was a towering portable palace of silk and leather. Armed guards blocked the entrance, but parted as I approached. One opened the flat, letting bright lamplight spill into the dark. Inside, the brutal war room had been completely changed into a den of pleasure. The maps of my doomed homeland were gone. In their place were tables piled high with roasted meat, fresh bread, and exotic fruits. Rows of heavy wine jugs stood ready enough to drug an entire army. Holofernes stood up from his couch as I entered. He wore a grand uniform, but had taken off his heavy armor. His massive sword hung on a post nearby, close but not on his hip. He looked at me with hunger. "Lady Judith," he said, gesturing to the feast, "you honor me." I bowed low, playing my part. "The honor is entirely mine, my lord. Your kindness to a helpless woman is beyond measure." He pointed to a couch opposite his. Attendants stood ready to serve us, but the general waved them away. He wanted us to be alone. He wanted intimacy. Perfect. I sat on the soft couch, carefully arranging my robes. My maid set the empty food bag near my hand, then backed away to the edge of the tent. Holofernes poured his own wine, filling a heavy gold cup to the very brim. "I see you brought your own food," he noted, pointing to my bag. "Old habits are hard to break, my lord, but maybe tonight I can bend my rules a little." I kept my voice soft and suggestive. His eyes lit up and he raised his cup. "To new beginnings." I reached for my safe food, but accepted a splash of his wine for the toast. I touched the rim to my lips, barely swallowing a drop. He, on the other hand, gulped his down and poured more. The feast started, and he drank with a desperate, greedy passion. He boasted loudly about his conquests and his grand plans to crush my people. I listened, acting completely captivated, asking gentle questions that kept him raising his cup. "You are the most amazing woman I have ever met," he slurred, his voice growing thick and heavy. "So beautiful, so smart. Your people are absolute fools." "Perhaps," I replied quietly. "I am just glad I found your wisdom before it was too late." He laughed, drinking heavily. Servants brought more wine, and the great general swallowed it down greedily, celebrating his easy victory. He was slowly, surely slipping away into drunkenness. I ate tiny bites of my own food, keeping my mind razor sharp. Every sense had to stay highly alert. I watched his giant hands grow clumsy, his speech slur, and his eyes glaze over. The terrifying general was becoming weak. He began to talk of his lust for me. He promised to reward my loyalty, painting a picture of the grand life I would have by his side. I responded with fake blushes and soft smiles, feeding his ego, without ever promising him a single thing. I kept him hooked. I kept him drinking. As the hours passed, servants cleared the plates and brought more heavy wine, but he soon dismissed them all. He wanted no distractions with his prey. The attendants bowed and left, leaving only me, my maid, and this massive drunken beast. I glanced at the tent exit, noting the guards outside. I listened to how the thick walls muffled our voices. My eyes measured the distance, the sword on the post, the drunk general on his bed, and the vast space between us. Holofernes poured another cup, his hand shaking. He gulped it down and laughed at nothing. His defenses were completely gone. This terrifying warlord was now just a weak man blinded by wine and lust, trusting his killer. "I think," he mumbled heavily, "I have drunk more tonight than in my entire life." I forced a gentle smile. "Joy makes the wine sweet, my lord." He reached out, and I let him take my hand. His grip was heavy and clumsy. He pulled me closer, and I did not fight it. I let him believe his tiny captive had yielded. Let him believe everything was going exactly as he planned. But as I moved, my eyes darted back to his heavy sword. Soon, very soon now. I just had to wait, let the alcohol finish him, and pray my tiny hands would have the strength to strike. His eyes began to close. He fought the sleep, desperate to stay awake and savor his planned conquest. But the heavy wine was too much, and the day had been endless. His body betrayed his stubborn mind. I watched him like a hawk. We were balanced on a razor's edge. Strike too soon, and he would overpower me. Wait too late, and a guard might walk in. Everything had to be timed to the second. The general's grip on my hand finally slipped away as his breathing slowed. He collapsed back into the cushions, barely clinging to consciousness. I waited, my chest tight, controlling every breath. In that quiet tent under the flickering lamp, the survival of my entire nation rested on a blade I hadn't even drawn yet. This was the end of Holofernes' final feast. The wine had flowed like a raging river tonight. He poured cup after cup down his throat as if trying to drown some hidden demon. Maybe it was doubt or exhaustion or the crushing weight of leading an army through endless slaughter. Whatever he was running from, he chased his escape to the very bottom of the cup. I studied him closely, pretending to relax as I sat across the table. I only pretended to drink, barely letting the wine touch my lips. I ate only the clean, lawful food my maid had packed for me, keeping my spirit pure and my focus sharp. This food wouldn't cloud my mind or dull my reflexes, and I needed every single advantage tonight. He, on the other hand, barely cared about his meal. Roast lamb, bread, and sweet dates were just excuses to drink more. Between every swallow, his cup went up again and again. "You know," he mumbled, his slurred words slipping together, "I have crushed cities that thought they were safe. I have broken unbeatable armies." He waved his hand wildly, almost spilling the pitcher. "But I have never in all my life met a woman like you." I smiled with practiced modesty. "My lord flatters me far too much." "No," he insisted, leaning in with sloppy intensity. "You are incredible. Brains and beauty in one package. It is so rare." He drained his cup once more and poured another. The servants had been sent away an hour ago. He had dismissed them impatiently, wanting us to be completely alone, free from prying eyes. Now only my maid remained huddled silently in the corner, like a piece of the furniture. This isolation was exactly what I needed. No guards, no interruptions, just a drunk giant and the small woman he thought he was conquering. He had no clue I was setting the trap. He started slurring out his plans for me. "When we take Jerusalem," he slurred, his voice heavy with wine and lust. He promised me a palace, servants, anything I wanted. "You are too generous, my lord," I whispered, playing my part. He tried to focus his eyes on my face, struggling to speak, telling me a woman like me deserved the finest things. Everything, anything, he mumbled, reaching across the couches to grab my hand. I let him hold it, though his grip was weak and clumsy. His coordination was failing fast. Good. That was my chance. I think I murmured softly, putting warmth into my voice, that "You make me feel safer than I have since my husband died." This thrilled him. He grinned and drank deeply to celebrate. When his cup emptied, he fumbled for the pitcher, spilling wine all over the table in his clumsy haste. He did not even notice the mess. "Your husband was a fool to leave you," Holofernes declared with drunken confidence. "If I had you, I would never die." I lowered my eyes, feeling so fragile beside him. "Death comes for us all, my lord," I whispered, "even the mighty." But he was not listening. His eyes drifted back to his cup, staring at it blankly before taking another heavy gulp. The wine was taking over. His movements slowed, his speech slurred, and his mind wandered. He began rambling about old battles, not the grand strategies of war, but the horrific, bloody details, the screaming, the slashing, the sheer terror of dying men. He described these atrocities as casually as if talking about the weather. His conscience had been completely eroded by wine and a lifetime of cruelty. I listened without flinching, though I felt so small and sick inside. I knew what he was, but hearing the raw horror was different. Still, I forced myself to nod, murmuring quiet agreements, keeping him talking and keeping him drinking. The night grew deeper, the oil lamps burning low. Outside, the enemy camp fell silent. An entire army slept secure in their overwhelming power, never dreaming that inside this massive tent, a fragile woman was closing a deadly trap around their commander. Holofernes tried to stand, but stumbled, laughing at his own clumsy limbs. "The wine is strong tonight," he muttered, blaming the cup. "Perhaps my lord should lie down," I suggested softly. "Rest? No, not yet," he insisted, but his failing body had already given up the fight. He collapsed back onto his cushions, his head rolling to the side. The wine had conquered him. I sat frozen, barely breathing. This was my most terrifying moment. If he fell fully asleep, I was safe. But if he stayed in this half-awake, unpredictable state, my entire plan would shatter. I watched his chest rise, trying to gauge how deep he was. He mumbled some gibberish, his hand reaching weakly for his cup before dropping uselessly to his side. His heavy eyelids fluttered once, twice, and then shut. He fell into the heavy rhythm of deep sleep. "My lord," I whispered. No answer. The mighty commander of the massive Assyrian army, the conqueror who made nations tremble, lay helpless and drooling on his couch. All his terrifying power was gone, undone by greed and foolish trust. I turned to my maid, our eyes locked in the dim light. Her face was a mask of stone, but I knew exactly what she was asking. "Is it time?" "Not yet." I needed to be absolutely sure he would not wake when the blade struck. I waited. 1 minute, 2, 5. His breathing became a heavy, rhythmic snore. Still, I hesitated, feeling so incredibly small. I forced myself to picture my starving people back home. By now, they were on day 4 of the siege. Only 1 day left before surrender. Tomorrow, the town leaders would give up. I could see the thirsty children crying, the terrified families arguing, and the men holding useless weapons they had lost the will to fight with. I remembered the God I serve, the one who used Deborah to crush an empire and Jael to drive a tent peg through a general's skull. God chooses the small, weak things to break the mighty. I was so weak. Just one woman against an entire army. But in my weakness, I could be a weapon sharper than any steel. Holofernes snored, his mouth hanging open, drool slipping down his chin. The terrible conqueror reduced to a helpless beast. I felt no joy in this, only a cold, heavy sense of duty. I stood up slowly, keeping every movement silent. I had already taken off my jewelry piece by piece, so nothing would clink or catch the light. I had prepared my body and mind for this moment, just like a soldier preparing his armor for the final charge. My maid slipped toward the tent door, standing guard to warn me of any guards while looking like a waiting servant. My eyes locked onto the sword hanging from the central wooden post. It was Holofernes' own blade. It gleamed in the dim lamplight, beautiful and terrifying. I crept across the rug, my steps lighter than a breath. I reached out, my trembling fingers wrapping around the cold hilt. The sheer weight shocked me. My late husband had shown me weapons, but this was a massive weapon, forged for a giant and meant for war. I used both hands to lift it off the hook, the heavy steel catching the light. I turned toward the sleeping beast, my small hands barely able to keep the sword steady. My arms shook violently under the immense weight, yet my spirit did not break. I had begged God to give me strength for this impossible task. Now I would find out if he was listening. I stepped up to his couch and stared at his thick, bare neck. I had to get the angle perfect. It had to be fast, and it had to be deep. If I failed, he would wake, kill me, and destroy my people. I raised the heavy blade. My muscles burned under the weight. Closing my eyes, I breathed a prayer so quiet it barely existed. Lord God of my fathers, give me strength just this once. My eyes snapped open. I looked at him one last time, then swung the sword down with all the force my small body possessed. The steel struck his neck, tearing through flesh and slamming violently against the bone. His eyes flew open in absolute shock. He tried to scream, but only a wet, choked gurgle came out. His hands reached for his neck, but they were too slow. Poisoned by wine, his body could not save him. I did not hesitate. I yanked the sword free and struck a second time with everything I had. The blade cut clean, finishing the job. His head severed completely, blood erupting across the cushions and splashing over my clothes. His headless body twitched violently as dark blood soaked the couch. His lifeless eyes stared into the void as the last spark of life went out like a lamp dying. Finally, he was still. I stood there frozen, the heavy, bloody sword shaking in my grip. I did it. I actually did it. The impossible nightmare I had prayed for was now real. The great Holofernes lay dead at my feet, his severed head resting in a pool of blood. For a long, terrifying moment, my legs refused to move, my mind completely blank. I could only stare at the horror I had caused, the shocking ocean of blood ruining the expensive rugs. This was not some clean, noble victory. It was brutal, messy, and terrifyingly real. Suddenly, my maid was standing beside me. She did not say a word, but her face snapped me out of my shock. We had no time to panic. We had to move before a guard walked in. She pulled a large cloth from our food sack, the very bag we used for our meals. Together we wrapped the heavy severed head. Blood soaked the cloth instantly, but we managed to contain it. We stuffed the package deep into the food sack, resting it right next to our bread and cheese like some horrific harvest. My hands were stained bright red. The blood coated my palms, ran down my wrists, and ruined my sleeves. I grabbed a rag and scrubbed my skin raw. The stains on my dress would be harder to mask, but in the dark night, I hoped no one would see. I stared at the nightmare behind us. A headless corpse sprawled on the red couch, surrounded by spilled wine and half-eaten food. It was a scene straight from hell. In the morning, his servants would find this horror, but dawn was still hours away, hours we desperately needed to escape. I picked up his sword, wiped it clean, and hung it back on the tent post. Let his men lose their minds trying to figure out how their leader was killed with his own blade. I took the food bag from my maid. Its weight had changed completely. What once held bread now carried the severed head of the Assyrian general. The bag felt heavy, pulsing with a dark, terrifying secret. I felt like anyone who looked at us would instantly know what was inside. But we had to take it. It was our only proof. This was the trophy that would make my people believe we were saved. It was the key to our survival. I crept toward the tent flap with my maid close behind. We froze against the canvas, listening to the routine noises of the army camp outside. Sentries chatting, soldiers laughing by the fires, the heavy boots of patrols passing by. Everything sounded normal, completely peaceful. I looked back at the couch one last time. In the shadows, the general almost looked like he was just sleeping. The pool of blood beneath him blended with the dark shadows. If someone peeked inside, they might not notice his missing head right away. We had a little time, just a little. I squared my shoulders, took a breath, and tried to quiet my racing heart. I was no longer just dreaming of saving my people. I had actually spilled blood. My hands, my soul were stained forever. There was no turning back from what I had done. There was only the road ahead. My maid gently touched my arm, a quiet reminder that I wasn't alone. We were bound by a horrific secret. I nodded, pulled back the heavy fabric, and stepped into the cool night. The guard at the door turned to look at us. My chest tightened. Would he see the blood on me? Would he sound the alarm? But he only nodded. "Going to pray, lady." My voice was incredibly steady, though I don't know how, as I do every night. "The ravine again? Where else would I go?" I even forced a small smile. The guard waved us through. "Watch your step in the dark." We walked past him, the next sentry, right into the heart of the enemy camp. We didn't run, we didn't hesitate. We walked like two ordinary women on a simple daily errand. Just another night of prayer, they thought. But we were carrying their leader's severed head, his blood drying on our clothes. We walked past endless tents, shifting from firelight to dark shadows. Every single second, I expected someone to scream behind us. I braced for the shouting, but everything stayed quiet. The army had no idea their commander was dead. When we reached the edge of the camp, the sleepy guards barely looked up. One recognized me. "Still keeping your strange hours, Hebrew woman." "God does not sleep," I replied, "so I must keep my vigil." The guard chuckled. "Better you than me. It's cold enough out here without praying." We slipped past them, leaving the last campfires behind, stepping into the Black Valley. The ravine where I usually prayed lay ahead, a deep scar in the darkness. But we weren't stopping tonight. We had to keep moving. I looked back once. The enemy camp looked like a sea of quiet stars, thousands of soldiers sleeping completely unaware. They trusted in their massive army, never dreaming their general was dead and two small women were escaping with his head. I turned toward the horizon. The tiny lights of Bethulia flickered in the distance. Home. The place we left 4 days ago with nothing but hope. Now we were bringing back a victory no one thought possible. The heavy bag swung against my side, a brutal weight. My arms ached from the sheer force of what I had done. My soul felt forever changed, but I did not stop. I had asked to be an instrument, and an instrument doesn't ask questions once the work is finished. My maid walked silently beside me. We didn't need words. We had survived the impossible, entering the lion's den and walking out alive. Now, we just had to reach home before they found him. Behind us, his body was growing cold, his blood ruining those expensive cushions. His head bumped against my hip with every step we took toward freedom. The darkness wrapped around us like a thick blanket, shielding us from the Empire until we could reach our own walls and announce the miracle that saved us all. We were running now, carrying our gruesome prize through a night that felt terrifyingly alive. We pushed through the dark like swimmers fighting a heavy current, leaving the enemy behind as we struggled toward the lights of home. The bag dragged at my side, heavier than ever, with its gruesome burden. Neither of us dared to speak. Even a whisper felt like it might wake the sleeping giant behind us. Instead, we shared quick glances, using a silent language we had developed over years of working together. My maid walked just behind me, watching our backs for any sign of pursuit. The familiar ravine appeared ahead, a dark tear in the landscape. We stopped there, terrified. If anyone had found the body, or if the guards had gotten suspicious, this was where they would catch us. This is where we would die. I strained my ears to listen, but there were only the normal sounds of the night wind rustling the dry grass, a distant bird, the tiny movements of wild animals. No shouting, no chasing footsteps, no alarm. We scrambled down into the ravine. The path was familiar. After 4 nights of making this trek, my feet knew the way even in the pitch black. Soon we reached the small spring. The water sparkled under the starlight. For a second, I desperately wanted to wash the blood off my hands. The urge to scrub away what I had done was overwhelming. But there was no time. We had to keep running, wash the blood off later. We scrambled up the ravine, shivering in the open valley between 2 massive armies. Behind us lay hundreds of Assyrian campfires. Ahead, the tiny, flickering lights of Bethulia. I felt so small, swallowed by the vast, terrifying emptiness between them. I kept our pace steady. No running that would drain our strength and scream panic to any watchful eye. But no lingering either, because every second was slipping away. We marched with quiet purpose, though the barren land made me feel utterly naked and exposed. Every shifting shadow felt like a soldier waiting to grab me. Every snap of a twig sent my heart into my throat. Still we kept moving. Just 2 fragile women in the dark, carrying a secret heavy enough to reshape the world. Would the gatekeepers even recognize us? Would they believe a single word I said? What if they thought my return was just a trap? Even if they let us in, I would have to wake the elders, show them the gruesome proof, and convince men of power that a helpless widow had actually won the war. I had to prove that the mighty invaders could fall, and that God chose someone as insignificant as me to do it. The heavy bag cut deep into my shoulder, a brutal reminder of what lay inside the severed head of Holofernes, our only hope. Beside me, my maid marched on silently. I knew she was exhausted and terrified, waiting for the shadows to tear us apart and drag us to our deaths. Time became a cruel illusion. Every single second dragged like an hour, yet the night was slipping away far too fast. We were hurtling toward an uncertain future, faster than I could prepare for. But then the faint lights of Bethulia grew closer. The massive stone walls took shape against the starry night, punctuated by the glowing watchfires of our people. Safety was right there, looming over us. Home was so close, but this final stretch was the most dangerous. Enemy scouts could be lurking in the dark, watching the gates. If they caught us now, right at the finish line, our entire city would die. I prayed with every step, desperate, silent pleas for a little more time, for protection, for speed. Behind us, the enemy camp stayed dead quiet. No alarms, no shouting, no sudden flare of torches to show they realized what I had done. The vast army just slept on. They slept trusting in a leader who was already cold. How long until they found him? How long before a servant knocked on his tent, or the guards wondered why their fierce commander hadn't emerged? I had no answers. I could only force my legs forward, begging God for just a few more minutes. The towering walls of Bethulia loomed above us now. I could see the rough stone, the dark silhouettes of guards on watch. Almost there. My body was screaming, my shoulders burning under the terrible weight. My heart hammered against my ribs as I forced myself forward, step by agonizing step. When my maid stumbled on the uneven dirt, I grabbed her arm to steady her. We locked eyes in the dark, utterly exhausted, but knowing we could not stop now. We were too close to fail. The last few yards to the gate felt like wading through deep, thick mud, but finally we made it to the shadow of the great wall. I looked up at the guards high above, took a deep breath, gathering every ounce of my fading strength, and called out into the dark. My maid kept perfect pace beside me. We slipped across the valley like twin shadows, the heavy sack bumping against my hip with every painful step. I forced myself not to think about what was inside. I blocked out the image of those dead, staring eyes wrapped in the cloth. I had to focus entirely on moving forward, one foot in front of the other, as the minutes dragged endlessly. We were halfway across when a sound froze the blood in my veins. Voices drifted from behind us, distant but unmistakably Assyrian men shouting to one another. I instantly grabbed my maid's arm, locking us both in place like stone statues, every nerve in my body on fire as we listened. The voices came from the camp, but there was no panic in them. I couldn't understand the words, but the tone seemed calm. Probably just the night guards changing shifts, I prayed. Or maybe soldiers heading back after gambling late into the night. We hadn't been caught yet. We hurried forward as the voices faded behind us. My chest was heaving not from the physical effort, but from sheer terror. How much time did we have left before someone walked into Holofernes' quarters? How long before they stumbled upon his headless body, and the entire camp erupted in fury? As we drew closer, the massive stone towers of Bethulia finally emerged from the dark like silent protectors. The gates were waiting, watchfires flickering on the ramparts. Home was right there, yet this last stretch felt like the longest journey of my life. My legs throbbed, and the bag in my hand seemed to grow heavier with every step. Sticky, dried blood coated my hands. I must have looked like a monster from a nightmare, a filthy, shadow-dwelling woman carrying a horrific secret. Finally, we reached the foot of the hill, looking up at the steep, unforgiving path leading to safety. I gasped for air as the steep climb began. My maid stayed right beside me, ready to catch me if I fell. The heavy bag swung wildly, and I gripped it tighter, terrified that I might drop our only hope. I couldn't lose the only proof of what I had done. Halfway up, the gravel slipped under my feet, and I crashed to my knees. Pain shot through my leg, but my maid quickly grabbed my arm, helping me up. I blocked out the agony and kept climbing. The massive walls loomed right over us. I could see the dark shapes of our guards against the stars, close enough to hear me call out. But I stayed quiet. Not yet. Not until we reached the massive sealed gates of our barricaded city. They had been shut tight since the siege began. I stumbled forward, leaning heavily against the rough wood to catch my breath. "Identify yourself," a tense voice called down from the darkness above. These men had been under siege for weeks and trusted no one. Looking up, I could barely make out the guard's face. "It is Judith, daughter of Merari," I called out. My own voice sounded cracked, exhausted, and completely foreign. Then a flurry of confused voices erupted above us. "It's Judith! She has returned! Open the gates! Wait, is it an Assyrian trick? Is it really her? Yes, I see her face. But how? We all thought she was dead." The confusion grew as more guards ran along the wall to see for themselves. Then I heard the heavy scrape of the wooden bar being lifted. The ancient hinges groaned as the massive gates finally swung inward, flooding the night with warm, blinding light. After hours in the pitch black, I squinted against the sudden glare. People came rushing out, guards and starving citizens who had been waiting by the entrance. They swarmed around us, everyone shouting at once. They reached out, touching my clothes to make sure I was real. "Lady Judith, you're alive! How did you escape? Are you hurt? What happened?" I raised my hand, begging for silence. As the noise died down, I looked at the gaunt, desperate faces surrounding me. These were my people, the ones I had risked my life to save. "Go fetch Uzziah," I told them. "Gather the elders and bring everyone to the square. They must see what God has done for us tonight." A young man ran off to find the magistrate while others spread the news. I pushed forward into the city, my maid close beside me, heading toward the central square. A massive crowd followed us, a chaotic mix of frantic questions, tears, and sudden hope. By the time I reached the square, hundreds of people had gathered, pouring out of their homes and down from the walls. Torches flared to life all around us. The square was packed with bodies, blinding light and deafening noise. We all pushed forward, desperate for answers. I felt so small in that starving crowd. Then Uzziah and the elders shoved past us, looking half awake and completely disheveled. When Uzziah finally reached Judith, his face collapsed in pure relief. "My lady," he breathed. "We thought we lost you to the Assyrians," he stammered, then stopped. He stared at the dark stains on her clothes. "Is that blood?" She nodded, and a sudden, heavy silence fell over us. "I brought you a gift," she announced. Her voice rang out across the square, strong and clear despite her exhaustion. "Proof that we are not abandoned. That power belongs to the faithful." When she reached into her bag, her hand came out wrapped in a blood-soaked cloth. We crowded closer, holding our breath as she unwrapped the heavy bundle. The last layer fell away. Judith hoisted Holofernes' severed head high by the hair. It was him. Even dead, those cruel features we had all learned to fear were instantly recognizable. Blood dripped onto the cobblestones. I gasped. Someone screamed, and then the square erupted in a deafening mix of terror and triumph. The roar swallowed the whole city. "Behold the head of Holofernes!" she cried, her voice sliced through the din. "The commander who threatened to destroy us is dead, delivered by a woman's hand." Uzziah just stared, completely dumbfounded. Shabri buried his face in his hands, while Charmus let out a sound that was half sob, half hysterical laugh. The crowd went wild. I saw people weeping, hugging strangers, and screaming with pure joy. The crushing dread that had suffocated our city for weeks finally lifted. For the first time, an impossible hope flooded back into our broken hearts. She stood right in the center of the madness, holding that dripping head. I could see her arms shaking from exhaustion, her body pleading for rest. Yet she stood tall, making sure every single one of us could see. She wanted us to see that help comes from where we least expect it. A quiet widow had become a warrior, destroying the empire's most powerful man. Standing there, she proved to all of us who felt so small that the weak can bring down the mighty. The noise grew deafening as someone started singing, and soon we all joined in. Our victory song rolled through the streets like thunder. Up on the stone walls, the guards stared down at the dark Assyrian camp. They waited for the moment the enemy would realize what one lone woman did while they slept. It was our dawn of deliverance. We celebrated in the square all through the night. She let us celebrate for a bit, but she knew the work wasn't finished. That head was our proof, but it had to become our weapon. She raised her hand for silence, and we quieted down. "Uzziah," she called out, "take this head. Hang it on the wall for them to see. By sunrise they must know their general is dead and their power is broken." Uzziah stepped forward, trembling as he took the gruesome trophy from her bloodied hands. He held it gingerly, still dazed by what was happening. "I will do it now," Uzziah said. "And get our fighters to the walls," Judith commanded, her sharp, tactical mind suddenly cutting through her gentle, pious facade. "When they realize he is gone, they will panic. When they see his head, they will break. Pursue them as they run and strike." Charmus stepped up, hesitating. "But we are so few. Our men are starving and dying of thirst." Her eyes flared with absolute intensity. "The enemy does not know we are weak. They only know their great leader was slaughtered inside his own tent. They will believe they face a terrifying force. Fear will do what our small army never could." The elders looked at each other. Her plan was brutal, but brilliant. A headless army cannot fight. If we struck during the chaos, even our small, desperate force could shatter their massive war machine. It made us feel like we actually had a chance. Uzziah nodded. "We will do exactly as you say. Bring rope." Men ran to help, and the crowd parted, watching in silent awe as they carried the head toward the main gate. We followed Judith up to the high walls, packing the battlements, until there was barely room to breathe. The guards found a high spot overlooking the valley, right where the morning sun would shine directly on the gruesome sight for the enemy to see. They hammered a spike into the stone and hung the head by its hair. It swung gently in the cold night breeze. Judith watched from a distance. The same face that had smiled at her hours ago now stared blankly into the dark, empty valley. His boasting mouth hung open and silent. All that terrifying power had vanished, leaving nothing but decaying flesh. I looked at Judith. She showed no joy or satisfaction, just the heavy, bone-tired relief of someone who had carried a mountain. Her task was done. The crushing weight lifted. Her maid handed her a water flask, and Judith drank deeply. She looked like she was trying to wash away the nightmare of the last few hours. Not all of it, of course. You can never wash it all away, but it was enough to let her breathe. We stared at the head in pure disbelief, reaching out to touch her robe as she walked by, hoping a fraction of her courage might rub off on us. She welcomed our desperate hands with quiet grace. But she kept walking toward a quiet corner of the wall. She needed to watch the camp below and see the storm hit. Down there, everything still looked peaceful. Fires burned low, and guards walked their rounds as if nothing had changed. But we knew that peace was about to shatter. The eastern sky began to pale into that cold gray light before sunrise, when the world feels frozen in place, suspended between night and day, waiting for the inevitable explosion. She wrapped her bloody robe tight and waited. Beside her, we all fell silent. We had suffered so much, starved for so long, and now we were about to watch our deliverance unfold. We stared down like men watching a massive storm roll in. The stars faded as light crept over the hills. Below, the camp began to wake. Men crawled from tents, fires were lit, guards changed, just a normal morning for a massive army. Then, a lone servant walked toward the general's tent. He pulled the flap aside and went in. A long silence passed, and then he stumbled back out, screaming at the top of his lungs, "The general! Someone help the general!" The cry carried all the way up to our ears. Officers ran from every direction as panic spread like wildfire. Men bolted from tents, clutching weapons and looking around wildly. An officer staggered out of the tent, pale as a ghost, screaming orders while war horns began to blare. Absolute chaos broke out below us. Soldiers ran aimlessly, utterly lost. Then someone pointed up at our walls. Even from up here, we could see the exact moment they realized what was hanging from the battlements. They saw him, their unstoppable general staring down at them in cold death. The panic turned into a stampede. Formations shattered instantly, and officers screamed commands that absolutely no one listened to. "They are running!" Someone next to me yelled. "Look at them flee!" It was true. The massive army that had terrified us was abandoning everything. Some grabbed gear, but most ran with nothing but the clothes on their backs. Fear tore through them like fire. Headless and terrified, they broke completely. Uzziah stood beside Judith, stunned. "It is happening just as you said." "Send our men, now," she urged, "before they can regroup." "Strike them now, while they are terrified," Uzziah signaled, and our trumpets blasted. The gates swung open, and our tiny, desperate army rushed out. We were so few, so small, but we charged down that hill, screaming, fueled by a sudden, impossible spark of hope. The massive Assyrian army saw us coming and panicked. Those who tried to fight stood alone and fell quickly. Our small force swept through them. We kept pushing, chasing them fast and hard, so they could never gather their strength to turn back. From the high walls, Judith watched the miracle. A giant army that had crushed entire empires was running from us in pure terror. All because their leader was dead. All because one lone woman dared to do what thousands of soldiers never could. "Send word to the other towns," Judith told Uzziah. "Tell them they are scattered and broken. Their men must join us now to drive them out for good." Uzziah sent his fastest runners out immediately to spread the incredible news. I knew that as the news spread, others would join the hunt. The proud conquerors would soon be chased through every valley. Their grand invasion was ending in absolute humiliation. Above us, the sun finally broke through, painting the entire valley in gold. The enemy camp was a ghost town. Tents flapped, fires died, and supplies littered the ground. Our people flooded in, taking weapons and food while hunting down the stragglers. Up on our walls, we erupted into a wild, breathless celebration. We hugged each other, weeping with pure relief. Children who had been dying of thirst were suddenly dancing. Mothers who expected to bury their kids were shouting praises. But Judith stood all by herself, just quietly watching us celebrate. She looked completely drained, her body aching, her fingernails still stained with dry blood. I could see the heavy toll it took on her soul, but we were safe. That was everything. A frail old woman walked up to her, crying. "You are blessed among all women," she sobbed, holding Judith's hands. "You saved our lives." Others heard and joined in, chanting her name over and over. "Blessed is Judith." But I noticed she looked deeply uncomfortable with our praise. She had not done this for fame. She did it because we were helpless, and she was the only one who stepped forward. She wanted the glory to go to God, but she knew we desperately needed a visible human hero to hold on to right then. We needed someone to make this miracle feel real. So she accepted our shouts with quiet grace, directing it upward in her mind. Uzziah and the elders approached her, his voice shaking with tears as he spoke. "You saved all of us," he said. "When they hear of this, every enemy garrison will flee. You broke their spirit." "God broke it," Judith whispered gently. "I was just a tool." Uzziah smiled. "Maybe, But what a tool you were! Down below, we kept chasing them into the hills. The massive empire that had terrified us was reduced to scattered running men. By the time the sun went down, there would not be a single enemy left in our lands. For generations, enemy generals will remember Bethulia. They will remember that their greatest warlord was brought down by a single widow. They will think twice before attacking us, knowing what our God can do through the smallest of us. That severed head still hung from our wall, spinning in the wind, a gruesome proof that power does not always win. Sometimes the faithful win. Sometimes rescue comes from the most insignificant place. Exhausted Judith finally sank down to rest. Her legs gave out, and she collapsed onto the cold stone. As her maid brought food, she chewed without tasting a thing. Her body was starving, but her mind was lost in the dark prayers that turned a quiet widow into a deadly weapon. She relived the horror of that tent, the heavy sack in her hands, and that long, terrifying walk home. She had survived it all. Against every impossible odd, this tiny woman had succeeded where an entire nation's army had failed. We were saved, but I could see the heavy toll on her soul. She had taken a life, not in open battle, but through lies and cold blood. That burden would weigh on her forever, prompting a lifetime of quiet prayers for forgiveness. She would spend years asking God if she had done the right thing or committed a terrible sin. There would be no easy answers. Some heavy questions are meant to be carried, not resolved. She had chosen this difficult path. Now she would walk it to the end. While we celebrated her victory, the quiet widow sat alone on our high walls, bearing the weight of the blood she spilled to save us all. 3 days later, the real festival began. Once the enemy was completely gone, our city gathered to celebrate. News of our survival had reached every corner of the land. Leaders and travelers came from Jerusalem and the mountain villages, all eager to witness this impossible miracle. They wanted to see the ruins of our fear and honor the woman who saved us. The town square was packed. Visitors camped outside the walls, sharing the massive piles of food and supplies we had salvaged from the abandoned enemy camp. Clean water flowed again. The siege was over. But while we celebrated, Judith stayed hidden away. She washed her body over and over, trying to scrub away not just the physical blood, but the haunting memory of what she had to do. She prayed, wept, and slept the heavy sleep of the utterly broken. When she finally emerged, we begged her to lead us in a song of triumph. It was our ancient tradition, like Miriam singing by the Red Sea. Like Deborah before her, we wanted Judith to join that sacred chorus of women who saved their people. She came out wearing plain, simple clothes, no gold, no makeup. She was done pretending to be someone else. She just wanted to be an ordinary widow again. But after doing the impossible, you can never go back to being ordinary. We parted like the sea as she walked toward the platform where Uzziah and our elders waited. The crowd went dead silent as she stepped up. She looked out at us, a sea of faces, children on shoulders, old men weeping, everyone staring in absolute awe. I could see the crushing weight of our expectations resting on her shoulders. We wanted her to put our immense relief into words. Judith closed her eyes, remembering the terror of the tent, the prayers that kept her breathing, and the desperate faith that made her leave her safe home behind. She remembered the quiet voice that guided her through the dark. Then she opened her eyes and sang. Her voice was incredibly clear and strong, echoing across the square. The musicians joined in, letting her words soar over our heads. "Play the tambourines," she sang. "Chant to the Lord with cymbals. Sing a brand new song to exalt His name." We began to sway to her words, clapping our hands and raising our arms to the sky in unison. Her voice bound us together. "For the Lord crushes wars," she declared. "He breaks our enemies to pieces." She sang of the dark invasion, the absolute terror we all felt when that unstoppable army first marched toward us. She forced us to remember our helplessness. The enemy boasted he would burn our land, slaughter our young men, and steal our children, she sang. We whispered in the crowd, remembering how close we came to losing absolutely everything. We remembered the thirst, the siege, the despair. Then her voice soared. "But the Lord stopped them by the hand of a woman. Their champion did not fall to giants or great soldiers. A single woman brought him down." But Judith, a widow, we thought was as helpless as the rest of us, destroyed him with just her beauty. We roared in approval. When we finally quieted down, she sang of how she prepared, casting off her mourning clothes, putting on perfume and dressing to capture his eyes. Every detail of her secret plot became a holy melody. She sang of her sandals catching his eye, her beauty trapping his heart, and then the sword slicing his neck. We went wild, the music swelled, and her single voice became a force that carried all of us. She was speaking for every single one of us who had felt so small. Our terror turned into her triumphant song. She sang of the enemy's panic, their wild retreat, and how the powerful were crushed, while we, the weak, were lifted up. God had chosen the most unexpected weapon. She proved that brute force is nothing against pure courage. "The weak have terrified them," she sang. "The small have pierced them through." Her verses kept pouring out, but she wasn't just telling a story. She was showing us that our survival wasn't a fluke, it was a miracle. What happened to our tiny town wasn't just a one battle. It was proof that we weren't forgotten, that even the smallest voice matters. Inspired, we all joined in our voices, rising to meet hers in the chorus. Together, we sounded like a thundering army. We weren't just singing anymore, we were thanking God for our lives. "The young and weak pierced them through," we chanted, realizing how small hands had defeated giants. Judith led our praise calling on the mountains and seas to join our tiny voices. Raising her arms to heaven, her face radiant with a power I'd never seen in a human before, she cried, "Woe to the empires that try to crush the small and defenseless. The Almighty will defend the helpless," she sang, "and the oppressors will weep forever." As her song peaked, thousands of our voices united, shaking the city walls. It wasn't just a melody anymore. It was the roar of a people who had been saved from the brink of death. We were finally letting go of the terror of the siege. We were celebrating being alive when we had already prepared to die. Judith held the last note, solo, a beautiful, fragile sound before the harps and drums crashed in. Then absolute silence fell over us. For a second, nobody breathed. Then a cheer broke out, starting small before washing over us like a tidal wave. I saw grown men weeping. Strangers grabbed each other, sobbing and screaming praises to God and blessings on the woman who saved us. All our pent-up relief finally exploded. Up on the stage, I saw tears streaming down Judith's face. The heavy burden she had carried for all of us seemed to lift. Her song had turned our chaotic terror into something beautiful and meaningful. It turned our absolute nightmare into a holy victory. As she stepped down, we crowded around her, desperate just to touch her hem. Old women wept blessings over her, and young mothers who had expected to watch their babies starve held them up for her to see. Those children were only alive because of her. We men who had prepared to be dragged away in chains stood free because of one woman's courage. Suddenly the crowd parted for a grand delegation from Jerusalem, led by the high priest himself, who came just to honor her. He brought a golden crown and jewels from the temple. His voice boomed across the crowded square. "Judith, you are the pride of our entire nation. With your own hands, you, a single woman, have accomplished what armies could not do. May God bless you forever, he declared, placing the crown on her head. But Judith, always humble, immediately took the crown and jewels off and laid them back at the priest's feet, reminding us all of where her strength truly came from. "These belong to God," she whispered. "I am just a weak vessel." But the priest refused. "Keep them so our children's children know that God uses the small to confound the mighty." That night, the entire town erupted into a massive feast. Giant bonfires lit up the dark, and wine flowed freely. For 3 days, we celebrated our survival with pure, uncomplicated joy. But eventually, the crowds went home, the visitors packed up, and our quiet mountain town slowly returned to its regular routine. The nightmare was over. Judith went back to her modest home and her quiet, simple routine. She locked the gold crown away, put her plain widow's clothes back on, and quietly returned to her prayers and her daily chores as if she hadn't just saved us all. But we all knew she was changed forever. The blood she had spilled, the lives she had rescued, it had left a mark on her soul. To us, she was still a quiet widow, but she was also the warrior who stood tall when everyone else cowered. She was the one who had done the impossible. Whenever I felt too weak or lost, I would join the line outside her door. She became our rock, a trusted guide whose faith had been tested in the absolute worst fire. We all wanted to learn how to be brave like her. She never wanted the fame, but she accepted her duty to guide us with that same quiet grace. She spent the rest of her years serving our community, showing us how to live faithfully. Her story spread across the world, inspiring generations of artists and poets. But to us, she was just our beloved neighbor Judith, a quiet widow who saved us when we were too small to fight, living out her days in peaceful prayer until she could finally rest. We wrote down her song and kept it safe. It became our shield. Mothers sang it to soothe their babies, and it reminded us of a truth far bigger than our tiny town, that we are never too small to be used for something great. It taught us that courage is born of faith, and rescue comes from the places you least expect. Every time we sang her words, we remembered the terrifying siege, our absolute despair, and how a lone widow stepped into the dark to save us all. We remembered that we are never truly abandoned. God works through regular, ordinary hands to change history. Her song lived on, a constant reminder to anyone who feels too small that hope is never really lost. The legacy of our quiet warrior echoed through the decades. Our town rebuilt, crops grew, and children who would have been slaves grew into strong adults. Life went on, but we never forgot the miracle that saved our home. Judith lived out her days with quiet grace, turning down countless marriage offers. Great leaders and wealthy men from Jerusalem begged for her hand, wanting to align themselves with the legendary woman who took down Holofernes. She turned them all away. Her heart belonged only to her late husband Manasseh. Besides, she had found a rare, beautiful freedom in her quiet life. She belonged to no master, owing nothing to any man, free to serve our community and God on her own terms. She aged beautifully, her hair turning to silver. The very hands that had once swung a heavy sword to take a general's head grew wrinkled and soft with age. Yet her mind stayed incredibly sharp, and her door was always open to us. We came to her for everything from farming advice to deep questions about scripture and family disputes. No matter how small or silly our problems seemed, she listened with infinite patience, offering us the wisdom of someone who had faced down death. She used her wealth to feed the hungry and protect the weak. Widows and orphans never went without, and when famine hit our valley, her generosity kept us all from starving. She became our quiet guardian, shielding us from ruin. She even freed the brave maid who had walked into the enemy camp with her. Though given land and freedom, her companion chose to stay by her side. They were bound not by duty, but by a shared history. They shared a bond, forged in the darkest, most terrifying night of our lives. They rarely spoke of what happened inside that tent. The silence between them said it all. Some horrors are simply too heavy to ever put into words. Their silent bond didn't need words. As the decades passed, Judith became a living legend. Travelers flocked to Bethulia just to catch a glimpse of her. Scribes begged to write down her story, and artists lined up to paint her portrait. Yet she handled all this fame with the same quiet grace she had always shown. Throughout her life, never chasing the spotlight, but never hiding from it either. Whispers of her deeds swept across the land. Some were true, while others grew into wild myths. People swore she defeated entire armies alone, saw the future, and worked miracles. But she just smiled, never confirming or denying any of it. She knew people needed legends to survive, but the real truth was already enough. When you feel too small to change anything, remember this. A lone widow walked straight into the enemy camp, took down their general, and saved us all from ruin. Nobody could deny that truth. It was already a miracle. As the years passed, the entire political world shifted. The mighty Assyrian Empire never recovered from that single blow. The shame they suffered at Bethulia cracked their iron grip forever. Other conquered nations heard her story and found their own courage to fight back. An empire that seemed unstoppable was suddenly exposed. Kingdoms rose and fell, and maps were redrawn over and over. Yet through it all, our tiny mountain territory of Bethulia stayed completely free. Sure, geography helped, but our reputation did the real work. Who would dare attack us when a single widow had brought down the mighty Holofernes? Judith stayed with us, watching 3 generations grow. She blessed tiny infants, then grew old enough to bless their children too. She was there for every wedding, every funeral, every rise and fall of our city. She became part of the very dust of Bethulia, as constant as our stone walls or deep wells. But as she grew frail, a quiet panic began to spread among us. How could we survive without her? Who would guide us or remind us of the day we were saved? The thought of our town without Judith was terrifying to imagine. Yet she faced her own end with a peaceful heart. She had lived fully. She served her Creator and her neighbors faithfully, harboring no regrets. She prepared for her departure with her usual meticulous care. She gave away everything she had left, ensuring the poorest among us received the largest share of her support. She gifted holy vessels to the temple, freed her servants, and left them enough to live well. She made sure there were no loose ends to burden us when she was gone. Finally, she left very clear instructions for her burial. She asked to lie beside her husband in the family tomb. No grand monuments, no fancy rituals, just a quiet burial for an ordinary widow. She wanted her legacy to live in our hearts, not in cold stone. Soon her final illness settled deep into her bones, and she took to her bed. Our leaders visited her. Crowds gathered in the streets outside. The entire city held its breath, waiting for the blow to fall. Inside her quiet room, she lay in the exact spot where she had prayed before facing the Assyrians decades ago. Her devoted maid sat holding her hand in silence. No words were needed. After a lifetime together, their bond was beyond speech. Uzziah, now ancient himself, knelt by her bed. "My lady," he whispered, choking back tears. "Is there anything you need? Anything we can do?" Judith offered a soft smile. "I need nothing. I have lived well and served faithfully. I am ready." Uzziah wept. "You saved our entire nation. You will never be forgotten." But she shook her head. "Remember God. I was just an instrument. It was a divine hand that guided me. She drifted for days in the quiet space between life and death. Sometimes she spoke to us. Other times she was far away. People lined up just to say goodbye, to thank her one last time, and to get a final blessing from the one who rescued us all. On a quiet morning, as sunlight filled the room, she slipped away. Her breathing slowed and stopped. Her maid felt her hand go cold. Their eyes met one last time, and then she was gone. Her soul was finally free from the body that had served her so well. The grief in Bethulia was overwhelming. For 7 days we stopped all work. Nobody bought or sold anything. We just wept together, honoring the woman who meant everything to us. Mourners poured in from all over. Jerusalem sent officials, and nearby villages completely emptied as people flooded the streets. We laid her to rest beside her husband. The tomb was simple, but the crowd was massive. Eventually, the quiet routine of our lives returned. Yet everything felt different. The elders who knew her slowly passed on. Their kids, who heard the stories directly, eventually grew old and died too. But her story never faded. Scribes kept writing it down in different ways. Some focused on the battles and strategy. Others focused on the spiritual lessons or turned it into a grand adventure. But the core truth never changed. She saved us through sheer faith and bravery. Soon, artists in faraway lands began painting her, capturing her most famous moments on canvas. Judith praying alone. Judith confronting our leaders. Judith holding the general's severed head. These pictures spread everywhere, with every generation seeing her through their own lens. Poets wrote endlessly about her. Some saw a seductress, focusing on how she used her beauty as a weapon. Others saw a holy warrior, blessed by heaven, or a symbol of a small, overlooked nation that became deadly when cornered. Teachers argued over her choices. Was it right to lie? Was it moral to use seduction to win a war? Could violence ever be justified to save innocent lives? There were no easy answers, which is why we keep asking these questions. For many of us, she was proof that the divine empowers women just as much as men. Her legacy sat beside ancient heroes, proving that courage doesn't care about gender. Some dismissed her as a one-time fluke, a rare exception to the rule. But no matter how people twisted it, her story survived the crash of entire empires. It outlasted wars, conquests, and eras of quiet peace, adjusting to every new age. A simple widow from a tiny mountain town, armed only with a sword and a prayer, became immortal. People in holy places still read her story, asking themselves what it all means. When you feel too small to change anything, this story is a lifeline. Under the weight of oppression, Judith is our symbol of resistance. When massive enemies loom, we look back and remember that the weak can actually conquer the strong through faith. She gave hope to everyone facing impossible odds, reminding us that salvation comes from the most unexpected places. During peaceful times, she became our guiding light, a model of devotion, faith, and the willingness to risk everything for her community. We taught our children her name alongside the greatest heroes of faith. Centuries turned her from a real person into a legendary icon. But beneath all the grand retellings lies a simple truth. An ordinary woman did the impossible simply because she trusted a power greater than herself. And maybe that's her real legacy. It wasn't just the military victory or the political shifts, as massive as they were. It's the living proof that ordinary, overlooked people like you and me can accomplish extraordinary things when we act with conviction. Her story whispers directly to us, courage is possible and hope is real. The walls around you might look too high and the enemy far too strong. But sometimes, in the absolute darkest hour, a single insignificant person with enough faith can change the entire world. Her legacy echoes through history, not because she was perfect, she wasn't. Her methods were complicated, even dark. But when everything was on the line, she didn't shrink away. She didn't let her smallness stop her. She trusted, she acted, and she risked everything. And because of that, our people survived and our city endured. From a tiny, forgotten town in a moment of absolute crisis, ripples spread across centuries. A widow became a warrior. An ordinary soul became a hero, proving that even the smallest vessel can carry the greatest power. This is her legacy. Faith breeds courage, and courage drives us to act. When you feel too small to change anything, look at her. Her story belongs to anyone facing impossible odds, proving that even a single person can turn the tide. How can someone armed with nothing but trust change history? It feels impossible when you feel so small. That warrior woman now sleeps in her tomb, but her story still walks the world, teaching, inspiring, and challenging us to find our own strength. It reminds us that hope comes in the most unexpected ways, especially when we feel too small to act. This is the complete story of Judith. From a brutal siege to the act of violence that saved them. From a widow's quiet room to the enemy's tent. From total despair to deliverance. From a single prayer to a legacy that spans the ages. Her story is finished, but its meaning is wide open. It is waiting for us to realize that even when we feel too small to change anything, we can still rise up, find our courage, and change our world.